you I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you for waiting. We officially have a public hearing that was scheduled to start at 6:30. It is now 6:41, and I'd like to open up the public hearing regarding the host community agreement with Castle Rock Industries. Please have your representatives or whoever come up and talk to us. It's a good timing to do that. It's good to meet you. My name is Matt Irving.
Doesn't look like it changed.
No, that doesn't.
All right, just to give many people in the audience or those listening on the camera, this would be the second public hearing, and I believe the fourth or fifth meeting we have been working in meeting with Castle Rock Industries discussing their outdoor cultivation facility they're proposing off of Walnut Hill Road. At the last meeting, I believe we had received a revised draft back from their lawyer based on items that were brought up in previous meetings. I believe, but I'll let the other members of the board also speak on this, that we believe everything we had brought up had been addressed. So this is more of a, we think we're final, we think we're good. We hadn't had any feedback from the general public from that last meeting saying that we should bring something new up. So I guess if you would like, do you have anything to say on this? Do you think more action is necessary, or do you have any other questions?
I was satisfied after our last meeting, as long as we had very minimal concerns last time, and I expected us to be able to go forward with it tonight, so.
Okay.
I have nothing further for it.
And you didn't have quite the same history as Greg and I with this, but do you have any thoughts since you've been here?
It seems like it's straightforward.
Okay.
Excuse me, I can't hear him.
He said he seems like it's straightforward. Anybody in the public have any comments on this? Any thoughts, positive or negative? Any support? Any questions about what's been proposed today? Yes, Ed.
I think read in previous Barry Gazette articles that the fencing that surrounds this plot would not be visible from the street, and is that still the case?
Absolutely, sir. It's way back on the property. The area that's gonna be fenced off will in the end be obscured from view by several hundred yards of trees, basically, in every direction.
It's a central piece of a 125 acre plot, if I'm right, so
Yes.
it's in the woods.
Okay. Previously, he's also stated that he would conform to whatever the planning board bylaws may come through on zoning. Understanding that was obviously generally based on the zoning bylaws that have been presented so far. The planning board did not provide any additional criteria. They had some comments on that were brought up, but we haven't had them say, could you do a different offset or locate it in another spot? So when that didn't come up, it didn't get included in the host community agreement. So
I would not presume to speak for the planning board, but as I've been attending your meetings regularly, I've been attending theirs as well. And they've been very gracious in letting me follow along with their iterations. And I believe firmly that if what they have proposed thus far is what hopefully gets passed in June, that we absolutely can comply with the regulations that they're going to put in place as well.
okay. Yes, Sam.
I'd just like to say, as a citizen, I give this business my full support. I think it's being done right, and I personally think there's too much regulation, because I'm business focused, but I think it's a great opportunity for the town and for these folks. So,
Okay.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yes.
Leslie Kelly, 491 Walnut Hill Road, Mary. I support them completely.
Huh?
And a butter.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm across 240 Walnut Hill Road, directly across from Tom and Yvonne's place. I'm 100% for it. I mean, I'll be directly impacted by, traffic or whatever it might be, but I'm 100% for it. I think they've done a real good job of laying out their plans, and I believe that's why there's no problems with it.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you,
thank
sir.
you.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm Steve Clark. I've lived on Walnut Hill Road since 1969, and I agree with the whole thing, I go along with them, I don't see any problems whatsoever.
Well, thank you. One thing I'd have to, I think it was a slip up, but on the agenda, we did not actually call out that we may vote on this. So I don't expect anything other than we're probably gonna put it on another agenda to make the formal vote, so we do it by the books, the paperwork. Because if somebody saw the agenda and didn't see a vote may be taken, written on there, they may not have shown up thinking that it was the time to voice their position. We've had that come up before where I've heard that and it was a fine line and we didn't, so we ended up re-voting it anyway just to make sure. I'd rather not do that, but I believe each Board of Selectmen here has kind of verbally already voted their position that they're in agreement, that this is a good host community agreement for the town and for Castle Rock. We've had multiple abutters and neighbors and people in the neighborhood come in and say that based on what's proposed, they also are either supporting it or have no problem with it. So I would expect that it's just gonna be I'll call for a vote, we'll vote, it'll be over at the next meeting. We may schedule a Board of Selectmen meeting just before, just after the DPW Commission meeting next week. And that would be down at the DPW yard on Wheelwright Road. So pay attention, if that's the case, we will be posting that on the town website like we normally do, or My Town Government. So the actual formal action and vote will be taken at that time also. I don't recall when we make that vote, what type of paperwork do we have to have so we can present to them that they can actually submit to the state? I would just like to see if we can have that form drafted and we can all sign as necessary.
I think we just need the.
This is different than the RMD where it's not the.
The CCC has a form.
I think the CCC, once he applies, will send it to us to certify that that the vote was taken, but I don't think that there's anything.
You can just download it.
Okay.
I was looking
I'll
at
take
it
a
today.
look. Okay.
Okay. I just want to make sure if we can, we'll have it ready for you, and the very next day, Andrew could reach out and say, come pick up whatever you need.
There is one piece of language that's going to pertain to this in every community host agreement we have so far. And my concern was raised when reviewing Ms. Ryan Doley's facility. We say we ask for a 3% of gross sales in the facility. Let's say that Castle Rock wound up having a processing plant in another town. And they shipped their product from here to that processing plant and no sales occurred. Where is our impact fee?
They have to show sales. From transfer from site to site, that's how the state is tracking where that marijuana goes,
There
is
could
by
be
the
an
money.
extremely undermarked sale price to the thing. So I don't know if we should tie the 3% to the gross final sale of anything grown in town. I'm just thinking of rephrasing that.
I
Not
hear
that I'm
what you're
concerned with
saying,
these
but I think
guys,
it's a state law that prevents us from doing more than that. Because it doesn't let us put a 3% on more than just the gross sales from the facility.
My concern is we may have facilities already underway which may not have any gross sales out of town. And the other one we have going. I'm concerned that could wind up being a lateral transfer.
It has to have gross sales.
Don't know.
You cannot give it away for free in this state,
No.
even if it's to another company.
No, but if the other facility was owned by the same company, it's not really anything but taken to a different plant to process it.
I'm curious about the licensing. If the licensing is what says,
We
even if
need
it's the
to-
same company, it's from site to site, there has to be some process.
Obviously,
but
the spirit of the
It's a
agreement.
good question.
The
And if
spirit of
not,
the
I'll go
agreement
to the
is
state and
3% of the
I'll
value of the product
try.
that's going to leave here intentionally wholesale, which is going to be less than a retail markup of someone who's growing in a greenhouse. Medical quality is going to be sold for smoking. That quality and that value is going to be much higher than a wholesale value. But the majority of things that are going to be grown in town, especially outdoors, I would think will be exclusively sold for processing, because I don't think you can meet the standards for the smokable aspect.
Our hope is that we can meet standards for smoking.
That would be a feat, I think, from what I understand. But
I've heard the same. Our business model, though, is predicated on we can be successful as growers of cannabis for processing.
I hope you're right. That would be much better for everyone involved.
But, you know, if we can grow cannabis that passes the testing for smokable flower, all that means is the wholesale price is higher.
Right.
Because, and then the 3% share to the town would be
Right.
that much higher as well.
And
Because
I understand
we are
Greg's
not
concern,
vertically
but it's more of a state level question
Yeah,
because it's a
right.
loophole that municipalities, I think, the
It's just
state's
occurred-
not gonna allow us to close that loophole if it
It's
comes
just
to.
occurred to me with something like what Mr. Iandoli, I don't think Mr. Iandoli is trying to do anything fast here on us, but I'm just
Yeah.
saying he is,
He's
he's the owner of a license for other plants, other grow facilities and the retail facilities, and he's certainly gonna be looking to partner with someone to have some sort of processing, whatever that type is. We know he intends to do an extraction for the THC, and that may grow into a processing plant that makes gummies or edibles or something else. And my concern is that, not him, but if we do this with someone else in town, if we don't do our diligence, they could wind up saying, well, we've made all this marijuana and we're selling it for, $100,000. When it may have a $500,000 value,
Right.
but they're selling it at a discount rate to their sister company, who's gonna process it for next to nothing, and they finally just pay a real fee on their sale point, whereas they're designing to make something on each portion of the way, so. That's why I just want to talk about this language now since we're on the topic. It doesn't change my feeling on the host agreement one bit. And we did discuss last week that we wanted to delay the vote for 2 weeks and do it by the end of the month. We did discuss it last week, not doing the vote today intentionally, just in
Okay, I
case.
couldn't recall.
Right, we could have made the provision for it, but I'm one of those that doesn't like provisions. I don't like to say we might do. I think we discussed last time, we'll plan on voting it next time, just in case something came up, or just in case there was a concern we wanted to address. We said we'd hit this and plan on a vote in 2 weeks. So I didn't anticipate a vote tonight.
Okay.
You have a vote, or you have a meeting scheduled in 2 weeks. I just want to make sure I'm understanding correctly. You may have another meeting between then?
Well, one thing I was gonna bring up is every month, we have 2 Board of Selectmen meetings and 1 DPW Commission meeting we meet at.
Right.
So that's the first 3 Mondays of every month. So next week, we actually have a DPW Commission meeting, and it's not all that rare because the 3 board members are generally there. We will schedule a Board of Selectmen meeting just before, or just after that, if we have something that's just
To
to
address
close it
some
up
brief
and
issues.
just more administrative stuff normally is what we address during that.
And given there's no objections tonight and overwhelming support from your neighbors tonight, I would have no objection to putting this on that agenda and voting for it and signing the agreement next week,
Would
if
you-
you gentlemen wanted to.
Okay.
We'll get you going a week earlier.
So that would be the plan, then next Monday, hopefully
And
we'll
that
be
would
able to
occur
take the
down at the
vote.
Department of Public Works building on Wheelwright Road.
Got it.
So
Probably be there at 6:30.
we could probably do this at 6:30 if the DPW
Or-
building's open, because
Yeah,
usually they're
or-
at 7.
Or we could do it here at 6 and just go there later. I don't know what you.
Yeah, 6 would be hard for me. 6:30 is usually the earliest I'm racing
Right.
back from
Well,
work.
obviously, I don't do so well at 6:30 sometimes, but,
How about if we plan for after the DPW meeting? Because I know before,
well, we could do it.
they have had meetings before.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got you.
Typically, our DPW meetings last 15 minutes. They're not extensive. It's a brief overview of what's going on. There's usually not a lot of urgent issues to discuss. They're dealt with on a daily basis
Way
through the
well worth
offices.
my time.
So,
No worries.
It'll get posted, but it's gonna be Monday.
we plan on Monday.
We'll
probably-
have a set time, and it'll get posted, and then
You can
you
say-
as well as everybody else can kind of just follow up on the posting. And
We could probably even say approximately 6:15 immediately following DPW, and 7:15.
they start at 7, so
7:15 or 6:45. But the concern is, like you said, sometimes they meet, they'll have a water board or a sewer commission right before that, so they're already tying the room up.
yeah,
Say immediately
Andrew can
following.
work with Shannon and Jason just to figure out,
Yeah.
maybe also they have something we're not expecting on the agenda, so we should just, if they think it might take an hour for a meeting, we'll just So we'll post it accordingly.
My guess would be like 7:15, just from where it typically goes down there. Would make no sense.
Thank you.
That'll get
Thank
done
you
a
very
week earlier.
much. I appreciate the time and effort you've been putting into work with the town on this, especially with the unknowns of the bylaws that are coming. So,
You clearly did your diligence with your neighbors, which is commendable.
We appreciate our neighbors.
thank you very much.
Thank you.
all. Okay. We have some meeting minutes. Did we have any thoughts or comments on meeting minutes of April 1st or April 16th?
April 16th, I am willing to recommend we approve the minutes and release of them for April 16th. Was there an executive in that?
That would be a separate set of minutes.
Okay. So, make a motion to approve the meeting minutes for April 16th.
Seconded.
Okay. Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
Aye?
All right. The meeting minutes of April 16th are approved.
The April 1st, I don't see the correction I asked for last week, so I think this, the wrong draft came back through. It was right here where we use the word detail, and I didn't want to detail
Oh.
this as a assigned duty, so that we could use an auxiliary and not pay an overtime
Where
rate.
is that?
It was just that correction.
Want to hand that down?
We just
Ken?
strike that.
It's about the third page. We'll get them out there. But just want to, that was literally the whole point of the discussion on it, so I just want to.
Strike that.
Oh, that's because I put it,
But anyways,
I put it at the motion, that's
Yeah.
what I did.
but it's
You know
just,
what I mean? I
yeah, I
know.
just want to clarify,
Yeah.
just to make sure it's, I want everyone to understand it without
Okay.
having to figure out how it conflicts within the motion and the sentiment. We'll get it next week or week after. Thank you.
I just have a question. It's not a, I just noticed, do you think when we start doing meeting minutes, we can start putting page numbers on the bottom?
Yeah.
Thank you. Next time, then we can just say go to page 4. It's just-
Necessity is the mother of all invention.
It's one of those things
Page
that
numbers.
come up when you go back and say, oh, that would have been nice.
Yeah, about
And then you
some-
forget about it, and then it comes up again, it's like, that would have been
Well, I
nice.
did that too. I had a question of the war, and I said it was about 10 pages in on it. And you just have, I said, I circled it, made a note, so you'll find it, but it was, yeah.
All right. So, what I would like to do, just because of my estimate of the amount of time and the people that are in the room, is jump to the age-friendly communities charge for that committee, and then we'll go to the
I make a
library.
formal complaint. I can read this. I can't read that unless I
I
read reading
know.
glasses.
I was rushing to get it printed out.
I'm getting there like crap. I'm trying to avoid reading glasses on camera, you know?
Yeah.
Makes me look that old. Shows my age. I hide it pretty well otherwise.
I
I was still in a roof working, like crap, I gotta leave. I wanted to finish up, like I gotta leave. I'm already pushing it, you know? Run out of grunt. So the soffits are open
Eileen,
overnight.
would you like to come up and give an overview of the
I'll get through more of this.
age-friendly, dementia-friendly communities proposal? It's,
What, Ken? Is this a continuation of this, or why is
no,
this
that's just the,
just the marijuana one?
it's, no, it's our local license. I tried to print it off of the comments from the.
Okay.
Marijuana Advisory Committee, so that way if you guys want to make changes, you can take it in consideration, the comments.
All right.
So, Eileen,
To self, start
Yes,
bringing
sir.
glasses.
if you don't mind taking a moment and just explaining to us as well as those listening, what the general concept of this charge is about and this committee is about.
Sure. It is spearheaded by the governor. He is looking to make Massachusetts age-friendly, age and dementia-friendly. So it's his initiative. It started a few years ago. And what it is, the concept is to make your community more aware of ages and dementia. So, for example, what that means is educating your community, your business owners, the bank, the post office, educating all those people on how to deal with somebody, say, who has dementia, how to talk to them, how to make it so that they don't feel like they're being, looked at as somebody that has a cognitive issue, and making them engage, so that it's making it so that it's more, folks have more understanding of what dementia is.
Okay.
And then the age-friendly is very similar. There's different, there's different pieces of it that go together. For example, this is age-friendly. There's 5 categories that you have to, a couple maybe from each category. So this is just some of the booklets that they have. So there's economic development, there's housing, there's community listening, transportation, health services, and community supports. So all of those, you take something from each one of those categories and you work on it and try to achieve something. So for example, say you wanted to put in sidewalks going all the way up, Pleasant Street. So that's something you could look at and say, okay, that's how we want to do some economic development in our community.
Okay.
So there's also things that you can do. There's a lot of grants that are available once you become age and dementia friendly, that will help to do some of those tasks. So you have tasks that you have to do. There's an application through AARP that you have to submit, and then I just kind of did like a brief outline of what you need to do for this. And so you have your initial meeting. So you bring in all different kinds of community members, come up with a plan, engage, analyze, figure out what you want to do. So what kind of projects do you want to do? How do you educate the community on that? What does it mean to the community? You have different, what is the greatest needs in the community? So are there, is it more that we need maybe a social day program, or do we need to have more recreational activities for the kids? So it really is looking at all that as a whole and in the community and trying to determine what is the best fit for the community.
Okay.
So those, I also have just some stakeholders there. Awareness, making folks, like I said, aware, encourage, and promote community of all ages. Making an assessment. You have a 3-year action plan that you do, and implementing the plan, and including a lot of your first responders, training your first responders on how to treat somebody that has dementia and can't remember. And then those 8 domains in livable communities, which is the AARP livable communities. There's 8 different aspects of that piece.
Oh, okay.
Dementia friendly, again, you have transportation, you could use the library, educating folks in the retail services, the bank, the pharmacy. All of those could come to the table and sit and discuss how to best make that community age and dementia friendly. So there's a lot of tools out there. I have some of them here, and I showed you some. The Mass Council on Aging has a person that is designated to assist with the dementia friendly. AARP has a lot of different tools as well that will help with that. So your action plan for this should include, for example, your demographics of your community. So there's a lot of pieces that you want to have in there.
Okay.
And again, is in the application. So it's, and you don't want to have a huge plan, a huge group. So somebody from retail, somebody from a grocery store, or somebody from the pharmacy, a bank person, a lawyer, one of you folks, an elder that has dementia, and then somebody that deals with the younger aspect. So those are what it is basically, is what you're looking at. It is a little bit of work, and it's a collaborative effort. It's to put Barry on the map, because right now central Massachusetts in this area has nobody that is age and dementia friendly. So if you could be the first to put Barry on the map, that would be great.
Great. All right, good. I appreciate that. And looking at the charge, I appreciate that it's in a way, it's
Questions?
broad, because you have so many other resources that break down the details of everything
Yes.
you're doing.
Yes.
I believe you guys have presented a couple months ago the whole task checklist book or
Yes.
whatever you brought up. So
Yes.
that's when we all looked at it and went, okay, this requires many people.
Yes, it does.
But that's the question. Now, my thought, and maybe I'm wrong, Andrew, but because this is a charge from the Board of Selectmen creating a committee, what we don't have on here is an actual number of people that will be on the committee, and that defines the quorum, because it is requiring open meeting laws. So you need to be able to know how many people can meet together. And because it's going to be very task-oriented, I would suggest you want this group to be probably at least 9. So 4 people can work together, and it's not called, you're going around the open meeting, because you're going to have a lot of that, almost like subcommittee work, where, one person grabbing the data, one person grabbing the road maps, and one person, and then the 3 of them or 4 of them come together and say, how does this work?
Right.
And then you come to your meeting as a group, all 9 of you or whatever, and then you take your different subgroups. So it's a big task.
Yes.
So I'm just curious what the recommendation is you might have for how many people we think we should define in this as the committee. Now, you'll have, if things go well and we get a lot of help from the community, you'll have a lot more than the people that are actually on the committee participating. It's just,
Exactly. Yep.
by law, we have to kind of identify numbers and names for that reason.
I would suggest probably 9.
Yeah. I thought.
And one further comment on the 9, where I'm thinking maybe 11. You have a lot of demographics and groups where you'd like to draw a pool from. When you have 11, you need 6 for a quorum to have a meeting. But that gives you a little larger group. You get up to 5 in a subcommittee working on something without breaking open meeting laws. And that's the other thing to think. If you're going to have groups or details or gatherings when you do things together, you got to limit that to a less than quorum number to keep open meeting laws. So 11 gives you a little more room there, but it also means you need these 6 to make a quorum. But I don't think you'd have a problem hitting 6 at a quorum. And I don't think you'd have a problem finding 11 members. So I would suggest maybe, that was my first question to it, was how many? And that's,
Yeah, I get
and that's up to you. If you think 9's better, it makes a quorum of 5 is easy to make sure you have a quorum of meeting night. But it keeps you a little low in your numbers if you're doing a group effort on something, whether it's gathering signatures. I mean, let's say you're going to go out and you have something you're getting signatures for a petition somewhere. You're going to limit how many people can meet to do that unless you have an official meeting before it and then disseminate. You'd have to have an official meeting in minutes and recorded publicly, or you could have 5 people at 11, they're going to meet and go do that and make their plan and go. And they can all have helpers and volunteers, but only when we say quorum, it's committee members. Official committee members is your limitation, so that's something to consider. we'll consider, I think, whatever you ask for a number, but that's gonna be something to consider. As the number goes bigger, it gives you larger subcommittees. The number goes smaller, it's easier to have a quorum for your meetings.
Right, that quorum ends up being the thing that actually allows you to make an official action.
Right.
So
But if
there
you're
is a
that-
difference of, let's make it a 15-member one, and now you can never get your 8 people minimum, you know, it,
Unless you have really dedicated members that have a true interest in it, then, and that's, you'll have to judge it yourself too, of who you get involved, if they're gonna make their meetings, and if they sit and agree on a date, you would hope they'd make it. That's the challenge, is whenever we do a committee, whenever we talk about the committee size, it's no joke. Now, apparently our last committee, they met in full force without a problem and put a lot of time in, and that was a very good committee. We were very fortunate on that one. And hopefully we'll be on this. But I had other questions in general. Can you give us a brief description of what dementia actually is?
Dementia is cognitive impairment. So the brain starts to deteriorate and folks forget things. So it could be short-term memory loss, where folks can't remember yesterday. It could be long-term memory loss, where they can't remember when they were younger or a child, or during their teen years, they can remember like a specific era of their life, but they forget. So it's basically folks that forget and struggle with it.
Similar to Alzheimer's, it sounds like there, but
Yes.
isn't there an
yes.
aspect of
But
confusing events and hallucinating and things like that as well to dementia, or is that, am I off in that?
It really depends on the type of dementia. So there's like, I think 8 or 9 different types of dementia in Alzheimer's. So it really depends on that.
And so I just want to just define it differently than Alzheimer's, because that description makes it sound just like
Alzheimer's
Alzheimer's.
is when.
Which affects still a lot of people as well.
Alzheimer's affects the brain more severely, so they usually die from a complication from Alzheimer's, and they also have it where when they got at a certain point, they no longer can eat or drink, where dementia, sometimes it stops at a certain point, where they no longer, where they still remember
Regress,
things,
yeah.
but dementia, they slowly will stop talking and stop eating. So it really there's differences.
See, because at first look, you say dementia and just aging, why do they bulk those two things together? My suspicion is, and then my next question is, how common is the occurrence of dementia? 10% of the time, 20%? I assume it's a relatively high rate of occurrence of people
I
are
don't
afflicted
know
with
the exact
dementia.
number, but yeah, it can be up there.
To see them tie it together with age-friendly and dementia-friendly, to see them tie the two together is, it seems like a strange pairing, like, it's this dementia with everyone's old, why? It's a serious pairing because it's a serious problem.
And it's also to educate kids on how to talk
Everyone.
to somebody with
Everyone.
dementia.
We won't just say kids.
Because a lot of children don't know how to react to like a grandparent that may ask them something, and then they ask it again. The grandparent
Right.
asks it again. They don't know how to react. So this will also help kids learn how to react and how to talk to their grandparent if they have dementia.
I'm fortunate to have known 3 of my great-grandparents very well. And I have a granddaughter who has great-grandparents that she'll know well. So my family has longevity, and I have a lot of experience with what happens is people age more than I think a lot of people do. And I think there's a lot of people will be surprised to learn things about it. So it's a great idea.
Okay. So does anybody else have any questions? You have anything going you'd like to?
Is the age/dementia friendly? Is the age part more of a physical deterioration as opposed to dementia being the?
No, the age means the community as a whole. So it's from infancy to a senior. So it's the whole broad spectrum in the folks in the community. So you're teaching younger kids, again, maybe making a bike trail for them. That's where you're running into the age. So making a bike trail for kids, something recreational for the children, that's where the age part comes in,
Okay, so
or walking path, or.
the age is more just about getting the different ages to relate to each other.
Yes.
Ah.
Yes.
Understanding their perspective of whatever, life, community.
Right,
So kids now better understand elderly,
yes.
and they understand those middle people that still have no grounding and are just doing whatever they want.
Yes.
Okay.
The term park means something.
Thanks for
different
getting
to every-
that.
If you say park, kids are thinking of a playground, and people in the 30s and 40s might think a nice place to sit and walk the dog, and, you know, seniors might think of a place to play checkers or just get out and have some fresh air and watch the birds. I mean, it means something different to everybody, and that's the overlapping, I think. And they can all be used in the same place, just a matter of making sure it's set up to do that as well, part of the funding.
Age friendly.
Making sure that
According
they
to
can be used for
whatever
everyone,
age.
not just
Right. Okay.
one. It's a really good idea.
Right. So I guess the only recommendation that it sounds like we're really coming to revise this is just to identify the number,
Mhm.
which therefore identifies the quorum.
Because it
You
says.
brought up a couple
At
thoughts.
least an officer and chairman, and we should say
Do-
and. We could just add to the first line, the election of officers and chairman.
Yeah, or they could just add another number. I'm
Or add a
okay
number.
however you feel to
Yeah.
format it. But
Bump them all down and say group of whatever.
do you want to think about it more?
What do you think?
11 should be fine.
11?
Yeah, because I mean, at minimum we want 5. If we get 5 people, we can get it started with 11.
Right.
So,
Okay. No, you can't. You need 6.
sorry, 6.
Six.
No, I'm just.
Yeah.
But we
Okay.
could bump all
It
these.
just dawned on me like, wait, that wasn't
Bump
quite.
all these
yeah.
two,
6.
bump all these 2 through 9 and say one will be, you know, the formation of a committee with up to 11 members. And 6 shall be a quorum.
No.
Good.
Okay.
So bump all the
There you
numbers
go.
by 1 digit, add a new one.
I would make a motion that with the inclusion of that, unless anybody has any other questions, we would accept this charge.
We can sign it once it's
And
amended.
then they can move forward with advertising for people to actually be on the committee, make the official advertisement, so that tonight they can just start all that action. Is that,
Should we come back and sign it just to make sure we,
I can have it for next Monday.
yeah,
Committee?
we'll
Sure.
sign it at the DPW commission.
sure. I'd make a motion to approve this charge with the amendment that all the numbers are bumped by 1 increment, and we add a new line 1, which stipulates 11 for the member size and 6 for a quorum.
I second that.
Any further discussion? Call for a vote.
All right?
Aye. Thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
taking
Thank
the
you.
time.
We should have it ready next week.
And kind of for moving this forward. It'd be nice. All right, the next big one on the agenda, well, there could be a lot of big ones, but we're gonna go with the Barry Library Association,
Woo!
which is technically a private organization that the town's been working with for a long time. And we're just trying to put it on paper a little bit more.
Yep, come on up.
Who started this crap? Simple little question about the little things. You know,
Sorry.
but it had to be done. I think it was the right thing to do.
How are Kate? Hello,
I wish we could read it better.
Hello, Lester.
How you doing?
Also includes the Board of Trustees, too.
Yes. I
As
apologize
a
for the
third
small-
party or as part of the BLA?
As a third party.
Because they stand alone from the BLA.
So-
Lester's representing trustees.
The trustees are the
Elected.
elected board. The BLA is just a private organization that determines their own organization, in other words. Okay, thank you.
So it was a very unique agreement. They had to have 3 parties all sit at the table and agree to one thing. But basically, rather than reinvent the wheel, we sat down and wrote out what the current means of operations are. And I think that we really came to a good consensus that really outlined that without changing anything. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to read through it, if you had any questions that any of the members of any of the 3 boards could answer for you.
I have some questions.
This was a long time in the making, by the way.
It's not an easy thing to,
It's not, that takes
when,
two parties to agree.
Well,
We
that's,
all did
that's,
agree.
that's what the holdup was when we talked about a roof and putting town fen to it. I was kind of like, we need some definition of what's going on before we
Sure.
just throw
Absolutely.
money out someplace that we have no say, no claim to.
Yeah.
Not that I'm against us supporting the library and money, but we've got to do our diligence, and this is probably long overdue that this has been done, so.
A document like this also allows us to be able to go and apply for grants from either party.
It's long overdue.
right, because you can show the
Long
relationship.
overdue.
I got you.
This is, I'm glad you've all taken the time to get through this, and I know it was not what you expected when we simply talked about fixing the roof, but I think it's necessary, and I'm glad to see it's come through this way.
It's definitely
So
more
thank
than the
you.
roof, because, you know.
Oh, I understand that, but-
How we all work together.
But
and
now that
make-
it's here, we can also address more issues as we go,
Yes.
which we, hard, I mean, we could, but I think it's irresponsible for us to just blindly fix things and do things there on behalf of the library without the town having a say or vested interest in it. And,
Well, I think that's why we needed the agreement first.
Absolutely.
Which is sort of putting things in writing. So-
that's kind of why I held you all up before.
Exactly.
I was hoping to see something along this line, so
Okay.
I'm happy.
I get a few comments. I'll go through with the first, and item 2 on page 2 is the occupancy fee. The wording itself I'm generally okay with, but I'm wondering if we want to put in there something that truly defines the separation from the general operating expenses versus capital, such as, is it something over $1,000? Is it something over $5,000? At what point is what's considered the town's responsibility? You know, so if you got a $5,000 AC unit go, that's a capital thing. But
Right.
it can be reviewed as a maintenance. So at what point do we identify what's operating versus capital? And I don't know if it's a dollar number.
Oftentimes, we're working with the town accountant to determine what those standards are, and working with the town administrator to find that out. And so, depending on what project comes before us, depends on which funds we're using, and how the BLA works with the library to get funds, or if we have some gift funds or grant funds. And so each project is different. And
But I guess what I'm trying to get at is painting a wall because a wall needs to be painted because it's been
Right.
chipped and
I wouldn't
patched.
consider that a capital expense.
Nothing.
No.
But painting an entire room may all of a sudden put you into a $5,000-$10,000 job where
I
you're
thought
moving
that-
furniture, doing the walls.
Right, I thought.
And so that's what I mean. It's even the same type of description of work
Mhm. I thought
goes
it was
from
like
maintenance to
10,000.
capital depending on that level
10,000.
of cost.
I thought there was a limit.
It's a
which said
contractual
10,000.
agreement. It has nothing to do with the law.
Right, so 10,000.
So this is us saying, at what point can you come to us and say, but that's maintenance? And we're saying, yeah, but it's gonna cost us $40,000. And you're saying, but you signed the agreement, we owe the 40,000. We've gotta put a monetary cap on how you can come back to us and say, well, you owe it. If it's a maintenance
So-
description.
so the thing is, though, in the agreement, it says that the town's responsible for both the cost of operating and maintaining the premises.
Without
So-
implied limitation.
I don't
Which-
think that it was set
So-
in there to say that, oh, and the town would work with the BLA to appropriate funding when needed for large-scale capital repairs. So I don't think it was made to say that if it's under a certain amount, it would be the town, or it'd be the BLA's responsibility, or if it's over a certain amount. I think it was more of that the town is generally responsible for all, but would work with the BLA.
We're not responsible for any capital. So even the roof would be a negotiated.
the limitations already exist in the fact that on the town's aspect for the library, we have a yearly operating budget. And if I'm able to do a capital project within that budget and the trustees are approving it, then we do it. If not, and the BLA can't cover it and it's not in my yearly budget, we would come before the finance committee and before this board and say, this is something that's going on. We're looking for grant funds here. This is a large capital project. How are we gonna move forward together? It brings all three parties to the table to discuss what the long-term planning is for those projects. So the nature of the agreement is to just call forth everybody's role. And I think if you get really strict into the cap and the money and looking at that, it's going to put a damper on what the spirit of this document is, because those caps already exist in our check and balance system of the finance committee and coming before
They
you.
exist under the current good relationship. But this is going to 2050. There'll be different people in different places that can look at this contract later and say, you know what? I don't consider that capital. And try to push the cost across it. And so I'm saying, just again, I admittedly have not been involved in this relationship between the three parties very much. Outside of a big high level, go to a finance committee meeting and learn about the budgeting. I don't really get involved with the board of trustees or the library association and how you work with us and we all kind of make this work. So I'm not trying to, please don't take anything I say at all about it is or isn't working, because that's not what it's about. I'm really taking a very devil's advocate view of a contract that the town is going to execute. And so for me, when I look at this, I think it's only appropriate to put in that cap, but you can also follow with the caveat of unless all three parties agree. And then it just allows you to just sit at the table again, like we've always been doing, but it doesn't give one side the power to say, but that's it. Because what happens if in 9 months of the fiscal year, you ate up your operating budget on things that could have been pushing capital costs, and then you come to us with something and you have no money left. But this is something that has to be done, and now it's the town's responsibility. And this has nothing to do with what have been your intent. It's just we get there, and now all of a sudden, especially if we don't have Kate or Lester or very similar members of these boards, and it can disrupt that. Actually, it can disrupt the relationship as much as just putting it in here. So that's why I'm suggesting maybe you think $5,000 is an appropriate thing that says that just needs to be talked about.
Sure.
And I'm okay with how you want to word it, but it's,
I think that's a great idea. I think that I would trust Andrew's judgment about this as to what the right dollar amount is.
I think 5,000 would be inappropriate.
I mean,
Okay.
in Worcester,
Right.
anything over $1,000 with the DCU
Yeah.
becomes capital, and SMG is not responsible for managing it.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But they provide, a huge capital project budget every year, and they generally get their money. I'm not saying they get all of it, but there are certain caveats that it's in there because you never know if that relationship's gonna change. And so you gotta put it in there and then just work with it, and that's why I'm thinking you gotta be careful with how much you consider. And now when I'm talking about that, it's an individual project or an individual piece of equipment or something that has to go over that number. It's not, it's pretty obvious if it's capital when you're gonna reseal and stripe the entire parking lot. But a lot of people would also wanna say, but that's just maintenance, because we're not replacing it.
Right,
But that cost is now,
right.
could be $10,000 to do that whole parking lot, to reseal it and stripe it.
I think, yeah.
So I'm just saying, that would just be something where we'd want to talk about it, not
Right.
necessarily be told, that's our job.
Absolutely, and I think that our whole understanding here was that we wanted to set up a situation where we could work together about it.
Yeah.
I don't have a problem if you have a number that you think is a reasonable number to put in here.
Yeah,
I really don't. I think that's
Would you
a reasonable request.
Would you think 1,000 or would you think
I
5,000?
think 1,000 is too low. I mean, the BLA can certainly, contribute. That's the whole point.
Before we get too far with this discussion, I'm going to throw another wrench in this. The Berry Library Association is the owner of the building.
Right.
Our town funds at town meeting are put in control of the trustees.
No,
Yes.
in control of Stephanie, who answers to the trustees.
No.
In the trustees, I work for the trustees.
She works
You
with-
sign off, right, on the invoices, not the trustees, when it comes to the accountant?
The two trustees sign.
So she just paid,
Am I done falsely correct?
did she just do payroll? I don't recall seeing the trustees sign every,
There are 2 trustees who sign every one.
thank you. Thank you for correcting me. I apologize for coming back as if I knew something.
I'll begin again.
I've got to admit, I was wrong, so I'm sorry.
So the town appropriates money at town meeting, which we put in control of the trustees. The trustees are our literal trustees who will use the funds, who are entrusted with those funds by the town of Barry. This states that we, not the trustees, will work with the Barry Library Association, and the association alone will determine how those funds are spent. I have a problem.
No, are you in number 2, occupancy fee still?
Number 2, the last line, the
Okay,
Barry Library
great.
Association may expend the funds in capital repairs as they see fit. How do these funds get to them? They're in the trustees' hands. How do they get the right from our townspeople to spend our town's money as they see fit? And this is where the conflict
I
started in
think
the
that
first
was,
place.
so I think that's just a miswording, because I think it was meant to be that they may expend their own funds as they
Yeah.
see fit.
Right, I
Yeah.
agree with you, that was not intended.
It wasn't the intent of
Their
the
funds should have
election.
nothing to do with this agreement.
Right.
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 No,
Right.
what they're saying here is, I think what this implies is,
If they get grant money, that's theirs.
no, what they're saying is, no matter what the town does with that building, if the BLA comes up with money and says, I want to do it, I can spend my own money and do it.
On their own
In other
money.
words, you
Yeah.
have no voice on what I can
Right.
do if I
That's
choose
just-
to.
Right.
And that's my concern.
I
for
think
how it
that's
reads.
what
So
that
let's-
last
let's clean-
sentence is
let's
just
clean that
saying.
up.
You need to
The
clarify.
Barry
Well,
Library-
further, no, further down, it speaks about their right to make any alterations without our consent. This
Right,
is
to the
speaking to
building.
the money. So there's different clauses that speak to both sides of
The
that.
Barry Library Association may expend its own funds
That's right.
On capital.
on capital as it sees fit. Which I'm just recommending.
Okay, no, I
This-
saw you were saying there was something else
We can
to,
change that.
Yeah, that was just.
After
a
that.
word.
Just expend their own funds as they see fit, because the way this sort of reads with what
Yeah.
comes, with
I
with
agree
what
with
it's
you.
following, we're talking about town funds and what we pay for, and then we go right into them spending the
Right, I
money.
agree
So
with
we
you.
need to
I
define
thought
that
that
that's
was very
not
clear.
the town money.
Yeah.
okay, yep.
That's my only caveat to that, in addition to the spending caps, and I think, yeah, 1,000 is a low spending cap.
We fixed the
There's
heating system and it was like
things-
$1,500 to do the cleaning.
Nowadays, that's
and
routine.
things,
I
so-
typically see 5,000 as a cap, which I'm
I would say
comfortable with.
5,000, seems reasonable to me.
Mr.
And
But I would be good with
yeah,
5.
that was just a starting line. I'm okay if
I deal
Andrew
with-
and you guys come back and
I deal with
say,
the other side of this all the time, and if someone put me at $1,000 cap, there's not a single project I would do for that town, without them going through a whole meeting and procurement process, and it's a pain, so then they have a 5,000 cap. And it lets them get a lot more stuff done. It's just, $1,000 nowadays doesn't buy you anything.
okay.
Yeah, so 5,000 cap, I think then we're all.
Mr. Chairman, just to address one other point, where it says the town would work. In this case, the town means both this board and the board of trustees. The
Sure,
towns-
Okay. So for us, we just need to define the first paragraph of the entire agreement that says,
Generally, then we should add that language, because generally the town refers to the selectmen and the administrative staff in the town.
So as trustees.
I would add the
Once
trustees,
this-
the town and the designated library trustees, because, or you can say specifically the select board of trustees. The town actually could imply the body of the town at a meeting.
Once
when you
this
say the
agreement is
town.
signed, it will fall to the trustees to
Right,
enforce it.
the town could literally be interpreted as the town meeting
oh, I
town.
follow what you're saying.
So
see.
I would define it, clean it up, take away questions later, anything we can neaten up now, so I'd say that the board of selectmen and trustees shall work
Yeah.
together to find funding for projects. And the board of trustees, she'll include the library, she'll include Stephanie in what we need for that, and Andrew in our offices, but that would define it.
But just so you
Clearly.
know, that was our intention, was to agree with what you're saying.
Okay.
So-
But once again, it's just, there's little language cleanups, this is very, so far,
That's good. It's
very
not going
inclusive and
That's
clean.
why we're here.
And this is why we go through all of our documents the same way.
That's why we're here.
We'll
The
still
only-
find more stuff, and someone in the audience will say,
Other
well,
thing-
that, you're gonna typo here, and it's gonna happen too.
All right.
Someone's gonna miss a typo, or spelling, or punctuation, and, but
Moving
they're
on.
relevant. I mean, punctuation changes.
Yes, Claire. Member of the Finance Committee. Yes, Claire.
And this is what we want to know. Because it's been wondered, I know, by the Finance Committee board. What exactly does the trustees do? What exactly does the BLA do, and where do they get their funds? Now, I know Stephanie handles what we, the budget, which we work with. But we have no idea.
Could you give that to her so she can read
About the
that?
other.
The definitions are on the first page here, so at least that, because I just read that myself.
And I've been wanting to know for quite a while.
That will answer your
Now
question, and we
hopefully
can, we can
here
later
they
post
can
this so other people
explain.
can read it, but that gives it that little definition of what they are. Basically, the Berry Library Association is the owner of the facility of the building, and the town occupies it, and the trustees are the ones that sign the checks and approve the funds that Stephanie wants to do with the library.
And they're in charge of policy for the library.
So they basically are
The trustees.
the managers of the library, so to speak, and as far as the funds, policies, personnel goes through Stephanie, but probably approved through them before that comes to us as well. What they define there anyways, because I was curious with the relation. So basically, the association owns it, and the town uses it,
Trustees manage it.
and the trustees
The
manage it.
association is doing the fundraising through different projects that they have, and they have their own funds that have had for.
You can kind of think of the Berry Library Association very similar to how the old Christmas and Berry Committee was. It was a private organization that created their own funds, and the town contributed funds towards it for the same thing. But two separate funds came in, and both are private organizations working with the town. And that's what I meant by that.
How did the BLA first come into being?
It was founded in 1883, so it's chartered by the state of Massachusetts.
It existed prior to the town's involvement with the library.
Right,
Right.
okay. And so we raise money. They also have their own funds that they've had, but we get gifts, grants, stock,
What's
ELA
created,
funded,
right?
which things we've just done ourselves. We have,
What's created,
private
you know?
donations from people. So we, Berry Village Improvement Society contributed to the parking lot. So there are places like that that we get our funding from.
So it would be like the police association that's not connected with the police department
But they support.
Sort of.
and
Kind of.
fire.
Except the association owns the
Association.
building.
Right,
Yeah.
except in this case, the association owns a building,
Oh, they
and,
built.
and much like we had commented with the Christmas and Berry Committee, when you have a committee like this that does their own fundraising, that's funds that don't have to go through us, that don't have to be traced, that don't have to be counted for at town meeting. It's much more efficient. They're not subject to prevailing wages and other things.
It's a private corporation.
But they-
No, that's not true.
We use it for a lot of.
It depends on the situation, because prevailing wages can still apply if it's a shared expense that's considered a building that the town
Yeah.
has use of.
But the many
It's
things-
various descriptions. It
If
has
they're
nothing to
doing
do with if we
gardening
own
or
it.
planting or some other things that aren't gonna hit us, they can do improvements on their own that aren't,
Oh,
they're
yeah.
not tied to us,
There are
I'm
other
saying.
things.
There's things they can
Um,
do without us that would keep expenses way down, because once it goes through the town, procurement process and prevailing wages, things tend to double in price.
Okay.
So there's a great
That's-
advantage to having the association involved.
They also are helping with programming, which is something that is a zero funded line in the library's budget, but is so pivotal to what we do in the community. So they're an important part of what we do, and they're strong in the tradition of what our library is and what we've become today. And I think we've all been working really well together, and this document solidifies that.
And it's-
Sorry. Moving on to another subject,
Yeah.
not the roles of each different party and what we do. Only because I'm trying to get back to this.
Yep. Good.
Good.
Is this about, Ed, I'll give you a moment because you did ask.
Okay, and I say this as if I remember the finance committee, if thinking from the point of view of the town's concern for future expenditures. Is there a problem if the BLA independently decides on a capital improvement that involves further future continuing expenses, further janitorial, further maintenance, further fuel? Because I think that then becomes a concern.
That is
of the
perfect,
local town.
because that leads right into my next comment, so thank you. And my next comment is, we do not properly or completely define the premises that you are allowing us to use.
Okay.
I saw one reference to, we can work with you to use Allen Hall.
And-
I understood that historically, we don't use the museum part. That is still BLA, always
Right.
will be.
Right.
So I think we need to provide floor plans and actually mark what is under the lease or whatever we're calling this agreement that we maintain.
Uh-huh.
Because if we can't use the museum, we should not be required to maintain the museum.
You are.
Well, the only thing you're maintaining is the heat.
Well, if it's not defined in here, it's the whole building and the whole
I mean- Yep.
parcel, so we gotta break that out. And that also then, if we break that out, and you add an addition or a shed because of the benefit, we have to come back to the agreement to see if we're gonna pull that shed into our maintenance responsibility. So by defining the premises more detailed, we address what Ed's saying is expansions and all that. We can just stay on top of it. It's not, it allows us to be more of a living document.
Do you
So-
want a map of the building?
If we just add it as shown in attachment A and put a
Yeah.
map of the building.
I've got a really good line.
Right, but you may need a little description because we also want to make sure that we're clarifying the,
We can do by
So
floor.
we do
well,
have.
floor, parking lot, drainage, I mean, what part of the entire site is,
And you could have overlays.
and I'm
like
okay
you
how
do
you
in some of
choose
the
to, I'm
town
just
maps.
saying we gotta do it, I'm not gonna.
Mr. Chairman.
You could have an
Oh,
overlay.
sorry, Lester?
I'm sorry, if you go back to section D,
D, I was just gonna say
under
that.
recitals, the first page, that's a bit more specific in terms of what.
And we could add,
we're
say,
talking
see
about.
attachments and add floor
Attachment could
plans,
go there.
which we do have.
And on the floor plan, if you had an overlay that would show colored sections, that the town uses the blue sections and the pink sections are strictly for the BLA. Well, you might have storage, you might have an office space that's not part of this.
Right.
Very, very, very simple to have a simple overlay and sketch out. And you could circle a room here and there that's gonna be
So-
pink, that's not for us, and everything
You
else.
might need to
blues.
clarify letter D there though, because this agreement is limited to library floors while permitting use of those other floors.
Right?
At what point does use of those floors then start to create the implication of what ownership we have of maintaining it? So I'm confused, so for me, I don't know law well enough to see if someone would say, that's a loophole. So I'm just saying, I like the idea of
We'll add the map.
adding the reference with the maps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's fine, and we can do that,
I
including
was gonna say, do you
parking
think
lot.
that's a more appropriate place to put it, is there as opposed to under number 4, or where do you think it should go?
I actually think it would be better to create
In the very beginning.
either use of premise or definition of premise, not necessarily in the recitals.
All right.
Oh, okay.
So go big.
I think the recitals are more about who are you, who am I, who is that person, and now because of that, we're coming together to do something.
Mhm.
And then you define what that do is and how it's contained.
Okay.
That's me. Again, a lawyer will probably come back and say I'm wrong.
And you can refer to the recitals as, further defined in use of premise.
Correct.
You can add a bullet to, just divert
I mean,
it. So that way they're tying in together without redundancy in the language.
yeah.
We don't like redundancy in language, as you've heard of many different issues.
I think I had 2 more questions. I'll get through those real quick and then I'll open it up to anybody else and I'll step back. But if you go to number 12, insurance, which is about the dead center of the document.
Yeah, page 5.
Oh, okay.
In
yeah.
line.
There is page numbers up here on the top left. I'm like, I don't see any page numbers. All right. Page 5, second paragraph of the insurance 12, which is 1 sentence long. The last 3 words of over each party's employees. I'll read the whole sentence. The town shall maintain workers' compensation insurance as required by any applicable law or regulation in accordance with the laws of the state or territory or province having jurisdiction over each party's employees. Maybe it's again because I don't quite understand legalese, but this sounds like we're going to provide workers' compensation for the BLA.
Certainly not the intention.
No, that certainly wasn't the intention.
Because it does say each party's employees, which means you're one of the parties and you're one of the employees.
I think we should just take out.
But-
I know it's more the reference of the jurisdiction over the employees.
But they're not employees, though. The employees are the paid employees by the town.
No, the BLA may have employees.
No, we have none.
There
We're all
are no-
volunteers.
It's all non-volunteer organizations, as
That
described.
doesn't-
Until they
that.
decide to hire people.
No.
The charter prohibits that. They can't do that.
So we could strike that and just say
But we could
the
get
town
rid of that.
Yeah, you could,
employees.
or the town will just maintain workers' compensation for their employees.
For their employees.
Per
Right.
For its
Period.
employees.
the
Period.
mass general law or whatever we consider is applicable. Only because,
And is that even necessary. We already have workers' compensation for our employees as part of our town's charter. This
That's
is
a good question,
this
but
is
I
a
do see it in a
redundancy
lot
that-
of contracts, they
I think-
would do it anyway, but I'm with you.
There's
Okay.
more boilerplate than anything.
Yeah.
What this is like if for some reason we skipped it and they decided they didn't like us anymore, they could say, oh, you voided the contract.
Well, again, the VLA would be voiding its charter, which is a bit more serious if they.
Probably get a nice endowment before you think to do that. And I don't mean that in a negative,
We can
but.
certainly change that.
Yeah, that's
No problem.
Now, on page 9, number 23, recording, it says here, the town shall not record this agreement or any memorandum or notice thereof. I'm guessing the word recording was intended that we're not gonna record it at the registry of deeds.
Right, yeah.
But I think we need to clarify this, because by contract, it means it has to be recorded with the town clerk. And it becomes a record that is a public record, so it's recorded. So we may need to clarify this, because we cannot not record this somewhere.
Okay.
Yeah, so it should, so we'll just say,
I'll do
with
that.
with the Worcester County Registry of Deeds.
And that's fine with me.
So that's where this would be recorded?
No, it'd be recorded with the town clerk, but it
You're
wouldn't,
right.
but it wouldn't be
It
recorded.
wouldn't be recorded, okay. thank you.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
And I think I understand this. You know, recording it there means somebody's gotta go and figure out how to
Right.
change it if there's a force majeure, and in 10 years, you're like, this isn't working. We've gotta go through the whole step of going through the deed. I understand that.
You could simply say this document shall not be recordable with the registry of deeds and holds no claim to the title of the property, period. And make it clear, it's just making clear that we have no entitlement to the deed of this property, the title to this property. So no record of this agreement shall be attached to the deed or title of this property, should be clearer. So no recording shall attach the title or deed.
Good point.
That sound better?
Thank you.
Make you feel safer?
I don't know well enough about that, so that's why, to me, it's just, I didn't want it to be too generic, because we would be immediately voiding the contract once we signed it. Because we'd give it to
Because we
the
have
town
to-
clerk and record it.
But if the concern is that we're attaching this to the
That's
title,
all, it was
making this
just-
a forever document to the title of deed, you specifically say that it won't be attached to the title of deed.
So you got that right?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
And that keeps it out of the registry.
Great, thank you.
And you can double check that with the attorneys to make sure I'm correct on it. I've been mistaken before.
Other than that.
I thought I was wrong and I
I
really
mean,
wasn't.
I really had nothing more. I think it's a good agreement. I think it just, again, helps define the borders, and this is the area we'll work together within. Consistently, we've tried to do what we needed to make sure you got your 2%, so the grant stayed in place, if I understand, annual growth. My first year, I learned that. Yes, I did. As a selectman, yes.
And we appreciate that, to have our certification, it's so important.
It makes a huge difference, and the more I learn about how the, even just the sharing of the library resources is all a part of that, that was pretty
We
interesting to
need to
learn.
be clear of the threshold that we need to meet of that every year, so we don't get like we were 2 years ago, disallowing it by mistake until we made the adjustment.
Right.
Understanding what it's for is pretty important.
Do,
We really appreciate this board's support of the library. It really helps.
it goes a long way. The library is a resource that,
It's part of the community.
It's a wonderful.
it's very hard to say the importance of the library in a town. You know, it's hard to put the right words, because everybody has so many different reasons why it's important to them, that you can't do it in just a few words. Because someone's gonna be like, yeah, but I like it for this, and I like it for that. And someone might just say, oh, it's a pretty building,
It's a good problem.
but it still matters, right?
That's probably happening.
And I know in this town too, we've got a lot of homes that don't have good access to computers.
That's
Our
true.
library is now a nice resource for computers.
Absolutely.
So that's very valuable, in my mind. Dylan, do you have any other questions on this yourself?
I have no questions on this.
Any other thoughts or comments?
I also love the library.
There you go.
I love being able to print documents for 20 cents a page.
Yes.
That's very handy.
Exactly. Any more comments? Any thoughts?
I haven't finished reading it all yet, but so far, no.
What's the next steps in this process?
make these updates, if you guys can be maybe one more time, just us to make sure that these are all in there, and then bring it back to you guys to make sure you're all set.
So does that mean we come back and discuss it again, or you're just bringing back
I'll just-
corrections?
If you guys
Yeah.
get to the drafts
Okay.
you agree on,
Yeah.
I would just say, don't wait on us if you happen to have your own library trustees meeting lined up. Put it on your
Yeah.
agenda, you work your, don't wait for one to do it first.
Right.
No, we are.
Because I think these are minor, I don't
In
think.
terms of the protocol, this board signs the contract and it comes to the trustees. So there's no timeline for that. Obviously, the sooner the better, but you can certainly wait until your concerns have been addressed.
I guess the only thing is, do you consider this the Board of Selectmen signing the contract? If so, then what we might want to do is change the Board of Library Trustees to say recommended by Board of
No,
Library
the
Trustees.
The trustees are a signatory, but after you, the protocol is that you negotiate contracts on
It's
behalf
a
of the
three-way
town.
contract.
So you sign the contract first. We sign it as the people who are going to be responsible for enforcing it.
When do we sign it?
And then the association
I
would sign
would
it.
imagine
That's
it's
not a
changes
problem.
to the board's sign.
Not a big deal, it's just words.
It's just words.
Would require all signatures to be valid.
Yes.
So hopefully the next selectmen's meeting,
Yeah,
it'll.
we'll work to try to get it to you guys before then.
Great.
Do you see the need for us to come back before you, or do we make the changes and your position?
Well,
Depends, I want to finish.
technically, I would actually like to know that you guys have approved it before it comes to us, because you will be managing it after that.
Okay.
I would like to know, in other words, it's your recommendation for us to sign it, and then we would be the last
Well,
signatory.
we are meeting Wednesday night, this Wednesday night.
So we could
Okay.
probably get the corrections made, presented to the board Wednesday.
We will not sign it, we'll recommend to you, and then after you sign it, we will sign it.
Send a letter.
Okay, well, we're done.
I don't know why that makes a difference, it's all the same to
Did
me.
this come via email to
That's
us?
why I
This-
said
well,
you shouldn't
did
be
we get
signing it,
this in
because
an
you're not
email or
signing
just
it on
tonight?
behalf of the town
Yes,
anyway.
We are signing.
Change the signature page to
Didn't
say,
get through
as
all,
recommended
unfortunately,
by
that's my problem.
No, we are. a
the
party to
library
it. We are a party
trustees,
to
and
it.
then we
Yes,
sign after you.
Yeah, we are a party to it, but the town bylaw is that this is the board that negotiates contracts, so your signature is paramount on the contract. Once you have approved it, then the trustees will sign it as recognition of that approval, and then we will enforce it.
Okay.
And typically what we do is we sign a contract last. We may approve it and everyone signs it, and then we have other signatories. we
Well,
move
here's,
forward.
here's what we'll do. We'll
So-
approve it Wednesday night, and it'll come back to you for your signature, and then we will sign it.
Okay, at some point, we have to sign it too.
Yes, between you and the board of selectmen.
I think we should sign it before it goes back to the selectmen, actually. So, we don't meet until the.
Typically, this is a
One
lot, typically this is the
Okay.
last
Right.
stop for a
We can-
document.
So-
And this
but I
isn't
can
holding up
always-
anything major, it's
I mean,
just
I can
dot the
sign
I,
it.
cross the T, and then we sign it, right? Or do
Right.
you need this to take another step on something that I'm not aware of?
No,
No,
no, we just want to have this in place. That's it.
this is just to put everything in place.
Okay,
as-
no, and that's why I'm asking,
Yeah.
because if that's the case, we can wait till after the
Yeah,
22nd, and then
so-
it's executed, it's done, and moving into FY '20, we're,
Right. So when is town meeting?
but
Uh,
let me
June
know
18th.
if, reach out if
Of
somebody
June.
thinks
Okay.
differently.
We've got
I
plenty
don't
of
think
time.
it's dependent
So-
on that.
No. Okay, great. Well,
This doesn't need to be ratified at the town meeting.
I mean,
No.
prior to this,
No, I
we've
just
just
thought it was
been,
nice
we're
to
doing
have it in.
business as we always have done business, correct?
And we will continue to. once
Yes.
this-
And then once
is-
this gets signed, I mean, it creates the box, but I'm
Nothing
not saying it's
changes.
really changing that.
Nothing
right, this is memorialization.
So that's why I was
of what's
more like the
happening.
timeline of signing this isn't, because I don't think we're
Right.
It's not
discussing
holding
it.
anything up.
And to your point, in 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. this
It
is-
would be though holding something up if somebody said, I'm looking to apply for a grant and this makes the difference. And that's why I didn't know, how does it affect you if we wait another 3 to 4 weeks because of that timeline?
That makes a difference.
Won't affect us.
Okay.
We do not currently have a grant in hand that we would like to put a proposal in for, so.
Okay.
The only real question will come up to me at the annual town meeting, is this gonna change the request for the budget, the line item, in other
No.
words? That's the only thing that'll make a difference. If next year suddenly, meeting these obligations, our budget request is 20% higher,
No.
that's where we'd have a problem. And I'm not judging either way, but I'm saying if that did occur, that would create a problem. So as long as this has been done carefully enough to make sure that we are just continuing on the same manner, which was the intent, it just gives us some definition, as we requested, to have some input on what capital expenses are and where the money goes and how it's used.
Right.
So we get some input before we spend some money down there, and we have some assurance that we keep occupancy of the building,
Right.
which
And
is,
certainly
which is
the-
my only concern before we dump money into a roof.
Right.
That we continue to have the right to use the facility after we do so.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we
It's the
can't
only
say-
reason I said something, a month or two ago when we started this conversation, is expenditure of capital without any assurance,
Yep.
because we had none.
This finally officially formalizes that agreement.
Good intent all across, and we
Yeah.
understand that,
But
but
to
putting
answer-
stuff in writing makes everyone rest it a
To
little
answer your
better.
concern, it's certainly not the trustees' intention to have this affect the budget in any way.
I hope
And I
not.
appreciate
It wouldn't be good for anyone. That makes us an issue at town meeting now, which we don't want. We want this to be smooth and
It's a totally separate process.
transparent, and now transparent and apparent to everyone what exactly the relationships are, what the Berry Library Association does, and people now understand you own the building, and they do a great deal of fundraising and put capital into it on their own. And I would bet we're contributing less than half of the operating expense overall for that facility. You're chuckling, it's probably an understatement.
No, I'm thinking about how much money we put in over the past 10 years.
I know,
which is
I'm just saying,
sufficient.
the town actually has to contribute a relatively minimal cost to keep this library going. And we're very fortunate to have this
It's a
established
beautiful
as it
building.
is.
Yeah.
I want to thank you all for what you do,
Well,
and I'm very grateful that you've come forward with this agreement. that we
so
can
I
get
want to
to.
thank the selectmen and the town for all that you're doing for the library, because this has been a wonderful experience to work with Andrew and with everybody here. I mean, it's hard to negotiate among three parties. We did it very quickly, and I want to thank the town for all that they put into the cost of, keeping the library going. It's very important to me.
My observation is, the fact
No,
that
I
the three
agree.
parties came together so easily means you had a good working
Yes,
relationship.
right.
You had a good working
Otherwise, it
relationship
could've
to
been
be
10
with.
years.
Right, I mean,
It was 10 years
but
before.
that shows a good
As
relationship that
as
went
Andrew
so
said,
smoothly.
this basically formalizes what we've been doing.
Yeah,
That's
right,
wonderful.
and so
Alright.
that's really important. Thank you for your support.
Yes.
And thank you too. I really appreciate you guys working with Andrew, and like you said, you did a lot in a very short amount of time considering, so thank you.
Thank you.
Claire?
One more question.
Oh, sorry.
Who pays for the insurance of the building?
We both pay insurance. The town pays insurance, the BLA has their own insurance. We insure the building. we
There's
insure the
actually wording in
contents.
here that speaks about what the
Yeah.
BLA
And
does cover
liability.
on their own. They have a separate insurance that this speaks of.
So what insurance would we have, the town pay?
Well,
I think
Give
Maya's
that to
still
Claire.
our
You can have, I have
insurance.
that in email, so you can have that packet, and everything's spelled out, because for the finance committee, she's gonna wanna see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That,
so we
it's-
know.
it's good to
'Cause
give to
I
them.
was just thinking, if they own the building, they should be insuring the building.
we do insure it. We've been
They
insuring
insure-
it
yeah.
for the past 100 years.
So that if, like, the flooding and that kind of stuff, your insurance,
It wasn't covered. Thank God.
Yeah.
As an act of God.
Flood insurance is specific insurance, which you know now, but hopefully the new drainage is helping
But
with
if it
that. We haven't been up there
burns,
pumping in a while.
say-
Yeah. As time passes, we have, we've
Which we were
insured
doing a
some
lot,
sort of
which we were doing a lot
here,
before.
but, some of those-
Couple times a year.
some of those are extremely valuable.
yeah.
Okay,
Massively
thank you very much again.
Museum.
Thank you, Stephanie, much appreciated.
Liability.
The amount you accomplished there at the library. Thank you.
Good night. Thank
Good
you.
night, thank you, Kate, take care.
Thank you, everyone.
And
Okay.
Claire, if you've got any further questions, give me a call.
Okay, yep.
Okay, what I would like to do is, I need to take about a 5-minute break, then we're gonna jump into some of the heavier stuff. Clarification, it means at 8:06. marijuana bylaw review. Let's get into that one. Just as a reminder, I'd like to get into not as many people here now, but let's just bring all comments and questions back to the chairman to get the floor before we continue. On the last couple items, we kind of got into more of a very casual conversation, and I believe we just need to kind of keep it moving. It's already 8 o'clock and we have some hefty things in front of us to include the annual warrant items. So, starting with this, we had received, this is specific to only the general bylaw, not the planning board's zoning bylaw options. So we are just looking at what the Board of Selectmen had proposed, and in response what our bylaw review committee proposed in response to their various meetings. And I believe it was the last meeting they brought up and presented this. My position is, with all the effort that everybody put into it, I'm willing to accept all the recommendations from the bylaw review committee as written. But I would like to see what the other selectmen or people in the audience have to say about this. Does anybody have any comments or thoughts?
I'd like a copy of it. You can't comment on something you don't have a copy. Okay.
I also support the recommended changes from the bylaw review committee.
You know, another copy of you. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
And this is the one that you want to make final for the town meeting?
Yeah, to include the comments, where you'll see in the right, several pages down, you'll start to see comments or marks and
Okay.
revisions.
Yep.
I'm willing to accept the final output from our bylaw review committee. I think that, from my perspective, the number, there were 9 members of that. And I think it was diverse enough that they actually had a broader reach to the community than even the 3 boards of selectmen would. As a matter of fact, some of those members were my bigger, like the inputs that I got were from some of those same people on both sides of the aisle that were explaining their position. So whoever they were speaking to, I think, had more influence to how they came to that meeting and what the recommendation was. So
I was wondering about, I don't know if Andrew, if you know much about, or if anyone here knows much about the right to farm laws, and if the odor requirements, if that's covered under right to farm laws, does that rub up against
So with
these proposed?
the other thing is that the cultivation process is not considered to be a agricultural use. It's considered to be an industrial use. So it wouldn't fall under a right to farm statute.
Got it.
That's the section I want to get to. We'll get there. Because we had discussion about how we were going to do the odor. And there we go.
did odor complaints come to us or under the zoning bylaw? Because I thought
We had discussed
maybe it was
whether
the
or not it
zoning
would
one
be-
that was about how many complaints require action.
So we had discussed whether or not that would go under Board of Health regulation. But it's my understanding that the Board of Health wasn't interested in really regulating odor, so it's still kind of out there.
Well, it's listed in our bylaw, so.
Is ours the one that say the numbers of complaints that lead to action?
That's what I'm getting to now, just reading the distances now. trying to see exactly what they put in for the changes, so I'm really trying to cover. I don't like
You
that.
said the Board of Health isn't interested in participating in this process?
Not as far as creating a separate regulation for odor.
Oh, but where we reference the Board of Health will go out to do something, they don't mind being that agent of the Board of Selectmen under this? Because they're not having to do a separate regulation or bylaw, but they're kind of by name said, we get an odor complaint, after we get 5 of them, we're sending the Board of Health out to do some investigation.
I'll have to follow up on that one because it was, I had asked whether or not they'd be interested in doing the separate bylaw. I didn't ask about that provision. No.
Okay. Because if, well, we don't have an agent that works for the Board of Selectmen in any type of zoning enforcement.
No,
Because even
but you
our
could-
zoning
but
enforcement
you could-
officer is a zoning bylaw enforcement officer. So who would we use if we didn't do that? We'd have to name it to a,
If we don't own the equipment, we're
Consultant?
gonna have to hire it out anyways, because we don't own that equipment. If the Board of Health doesn't want to get into the equipment ownership and the testing, then we're gonna need
yeah,
to.
but the truth is the Board of Health is the only board that has jurisdiction. Unless you go to the state DEP. Air quality is not under zoning, it's not under Board of Selectmen, it's a Board of Health.
P regulation.
Well, if the town approves this and this orders that the Board of Health is gonna do it, then the Board of Health has to do it. If this bylaw
Yeah,
is implemented by the
if the
town,
bylaw's
then the
brought
Board
in,
of Health
you're
can't say
right.
we don't wanna do it.
Because even though they're elected, it's still a bylaw that tells the elected officials what they can
And
and
then
can't
they
do.
will have to come up with the proper testing equipment and the manner to do it in. This directs the
It would
Board of
just-
Health.
It would just basically be put onto them to, hire a consultant. I would think hire a consultant that would be able to do that type of testing. I would,
But
I
given-
can't see us going out and purchasing a piece of equipment for.
Depends on the value, but given, last time when I, proposed changes that the transfer station and things, it's within the jurisdiction without running it by them first. I really think this language, we need to at least give them respect of showing them this language and explain what it's gonna mean before we put this in the town meeting floor. I think we definitely owe them that, and I have learned from last time that, no intent to do anything, harmful or derogatory towards them, but certainly it's perceived that way, so. I still don't like the number of 5. I think it's gonna affect one direct neighbor in one direction as well as, so that person could be greatly affected and have no relief, which is not reasonable to an abutter. If there is a real problem, that one person, there's nothing they can do about it, and that's not
But you're
reasonable.
never gonna be able to necessarily define whether that one person is
It needs to be
just got a
tested.
vendetta against a neighbor or not.
Right, and I discussed that. maybe-
And that's why we thought at least more than one should, well, that's why the bylaw review committee came up and said we thought a certain odd number other than one should be there.
Bring it down to 3.
It could be 3 or 3 consecutive days of complaint. So if it persists for 3 days of complaint, then we would act on it. Not like they say, oh, I smell something now, but there would have to be 3 consecutive days.
3 days of complaints is no different than the same person just calling in 3
Right.
days in a row because they don't like their neighbor.
But at least they've done it 3 days in a row, and then if the,
It doesn't have to be 3 people living as abutters either, in my opinion. It just has to be 3 people willing to put their name on it. So it could be the person that lives there and 2 of their friends that come over and say, I smell it too.
states of butters.
I'm suggesting that that might be something that's acceptable is 5 is fine, but 5 needs to be
Complaints within this
5
distance.
separate people putting their name on it that's over 18 years old. So it can't be a whole family of 2 parents and 7 kids signing something saying this bothers me. So they can invite friends over and say, this is bothering me. They all
5
put-
complaints.
They say, yep, I'm smelling it too, and then now you got 5.
5 complaints of odor within this abutter zone from 5 different residences in town. So we'd have to get complaints from 5 different residences that there's an odor within this zone.
Or a single complaint with 5 names.
This needs
Yeah.
cleaning up, is all
Yeah,
I'm
I'm
saying.
just wondering whether or not,
This is my one hangup when we went through
rather
this
than,
stuff.
rather than
and it still
putting a
is.
cap on it, maybe just putting like a, I'm gonna say a statement of, like a reasonable, you know, I say a reasonable, you know, complaints with reasonable credibility or something like that, but.
That's why you just need 4 more people to put a name on it, on
We
a
need-
single complaint. Has to have the 5 names.
To be enforceable.
So if it's
there has
bothering
to be-
someone enough, they'll call a friend over and say, could you smell this? Do you agree? Could you put your name on this? You move on. And that's their way of validating it's not just them and their personality. That you need to get, if you feel more comfortable with 3 names instead of 5, I'm not saying like I want a, you know, a warrant
If I-
petition signature list, I just meant,
So how about if I'll take that wording, I'll send it to the Board of Health, ask for their recommendation on that. Maybe we can come back to the table at the next meeting with their recommendation.
And we
Integrate
should,
it.
because the cost of that third-party consultant is not gonna be found anywhere.
Yeah.
and we
We've
could
gotta figure
also,
out, that's one of the funding issues is,
Mhm.
who's paying for them to go out and check this and find out, yep, it's not a problem.
we say a value of 7 on this DT scale that they're.
I'm guessing that was pulled from a state reg, like more
What
details in
what
the
if we
state
further
regs.
define
Colorado, I
that,
think is what they got
that
the-
if upon investigation, the value is lower than, is 3 or lower, that person shall be, you know, if they have 2 complaints from that same parties, in both of those times, the values are lower than 4, subsequent complaints of that party shall not be entertained. If someone's made a false complaint, an attempt at a complaint, and it's very low, you say, look, it's only at this value, you're wasting time and money. If they do it again and it's that low, they shouldn't have,
The only,
or maybe they have to pay for it if they make another one, they begin to pay for those
the only thing
testing.
is, you know, if it's kind of like an intermittent, you know, because atmospheric conditions can greatly change how.
Absolutely.
You know, where the smell is, so you could make a complaint one day and go out later on that day, and it's late, and do an investigation, and not smell it.
And that's why
Here's
we
the
need
worst
a-
part, so
Yeah.
we'll follow up. How quickly are we gonna follow up? Board of Health gonna get the third-party consultant out there the next day or in a month? Month goes by, I think you mentioned flower season or whatever, the high smell season is only potentially 2 to 3 weeks.
Yep.
So, I'm complaining.
All
They
right.
show up 4 weeks later,
How
there's
about-
nothing to complain about.
How about something like this?
It's a hard one.
Upon receiving the 5 complaints, the air shall be tested within 2 weeks. That way, if it's still going in 2 weeks, we have a legit complaint, we file it. And then if it's there 2 weeks later, which it shouldn't be, it will be done.
5 complaints ever, or 5 complaints within?
Within the
window?
zone, 5 complaints within the zone by 5 different parties. So instead of saying 5
No,
abutters.
He means
I
like
mean, in
timeline.
time sense, yeah.
No, if I'm saying if we have the 5 people complain, which trips a test, we must perform that test within 2 weeks.
But the thing about the 5 complaints he's saying is, if a site gets a 5th complaint after year 4, or is
Well,
it, you get
well-
5 complaints within a growing season?
Well, there you go.
Or,
We'd have to say we have 5 complaints within a certain time frame too. If we get 5 complaints within a 2-week period, then we must have the air tested within 2 weeks from the 5th complaint being received. Then if you have 4 complaints, then 6 months later you get a 5th, okay, we'll test. And now we're back to 0, we start the count over. But actually, if it'd have to be at the end of 2 weeks we have the 5th complaint. If it's 3 weeks, we have complaint number 5, that's really complaint number 1. We need to have 5 complaints within a 2-week or within a 1-week period. And then we'd have a week or 2, you know what I mean? We could keep it tighter and say 5 complaints of the week, and then we must test within a week. And if we say 5 complaints in 2 weeks, then we'll make the test period within 2 weeks. I think those should be similar. If we're gonna say 5 complaints in a month, then we need to perform the test within the next month. I think those should be balanced. If we're gonna give a larger room for the complaints to come in, we need to give a larger room for testing time to get out there and do it.
The problem with the
So I think-
complaints varies depending on, again, the type of site. Outdoor cultivation is somewhat excluded from that already,
Right.
because I think they even excluded it from that, knowing outdoor
No.
cultivation
No.
is
They do
not.
not. The indoor is very strict on the property edge, the outdoor is at 300 feet.
Okay, that's what I meant, but in just a sec.
I'm thinking a week. 'Cause that
But
would
the
have to be
problem
real.
is, you could have a certain indoor facility that 1 week a month is always, for some reason, creating a lot of stink. Who knows why? It could be an operational issue, a maintenance issue and it's become a neighborhood issue. But you can never show up when the testing works because the complaint goes in the week that it smells, and then a week later it doesn't smell, the test. At some point, the data is gonna support that this is a false call, but the reality may mean it's actually happening, but we can never time the testing to the complaint and the actual
And
And that's what I'm trying to think of, is there a way to write this to cover that problem?
To write it to cover the problem, we're gonna have to go out for, as you said, any complaint anyone makes, and it's gonna, not just the annoyance of false complaints, but it's gonna be expensive. If someone decides to make 5 complaints, we have to run out 5 times, we have to limit our liability in testing as well. I don't wanna belittle somebody's discomfort if it smells, but I think if we give it a week window and a week to test.
I got one
I
thing to
think it's
follow up
reasonable.
on that then, and maybe what we need to do is a little research, whether you go to the Cannabis Commission, the CCC, see if they have any information on this, but who would be your third-party consultant?
Right.
And can they tell you how quickly they can turn around a request to go test something? Because that's the boundaries we gotta figure out.
We may
I mean,
not
the
be
other-
able to-
Because it doesn't matter if we say 2 weeks and the guy's like, I can't get there for a month.
I mean,
I got 7 towns calling me.
The other way I've seen it written up is basically that somebody with a you know, a reasonable sense of smell, if they can go out and smell it, you can attest to the fact that it smells.
Yeah, but
As an
everybody thinks
agent on
their
behalf-
version of smell is
But
reasonable.
I'm just saying, for an agent that acting on behalf
I
of the
would.
town.
And that might be the easier way to do it, because we try to set definitions immediately, either we're gonna buy an equipment, train people, maintain training, and go use this equipment, whatever it costs to use, and whatever unknown basis we have. We may say a reasonable person sense of smell and designate a Board of Health agent to do it, and it's done, and there may never be a complaint, and we may never have an issue, and all this may be for naught. And if it becomes a further issue, that's, I see part of our limiting of 3 when it was discussed here on the floor that we shouldn't have any limits. Limiting of 3 lets us see what we have to deal with here before we go to more. And then we'll know if we do need to take further action, purchase certain equipment and make certain changes before we get into more facilities. So that may be a very reasonable way to say a person with reasonably normal olfactory senses determines that it is a unreasonably pungent or overpowering smell. Not that you can smell it, that it's unreasonable. Because as we said in this town, when people fertilize their fields, especially with chicken feces, it's very offensive, and it stays for a couple of weeks. It's just part of living in farm country, and we all know it. I wouldn't, to get rid of that, I'd have to move out of the country, and I wouldn't want to do it. I like country living. It's part of what we deal with. People that come here, you laugh at them. City folk can go, oh, what is that smell? You'll get used to it. That's just the way it is.
What's your thoughts on this?
I'm curious what, if the CCC has recommendations for dealing with odor generally. Also, if they would be a resource in procuring equipment, maybe on a rental basis. But then also, I also wonder what other towns do. I'm gonna research this, I think, this week, because it's very interesting to me. Also, I wonder if there could be a committee that could do, without the olfactor machine, a reasonable smell of a human, if you have a committee that has a quorum to vote on site. if it should come up, I wonder. So that way you're not relying on one person, whatever their nose tells them, and whatever their bias is, and whatever.
You could just leave it to the Board of Selectmen. I mean, you could say that, you'd send the town administrator to go out there and take a smell. If he smells it, call in, and just say, hey, I smell something, I'm gonna ask for the members of the board to come out with me.
That's a reasonable way to do it. Let the town-
That'll require a minimum of 2 days' wait, because we can't go out there as a board to do it without an open meeting call.
We can individually.
Right, I just meant we couldn't all,
Right, but-
4 of us go there to go,
But Andrew.
what do you
could-
think, what do you think?
Andrew could schedule us to each come out with him and take our own opinion. He can take a poll of our opinions.
And go, hey, we got a couple of complaints, I went up there, they're legitimate complaints, I think you guys should go out there and take a look yourself. If you think, if you
I'm in
guys
support
agree,
of
we
that,
can.
because I think at least you're
do
still
it
getting
right.
3 different
So
people, 3
if-
different opinions.
If he finds there's concern or an odor, you can pick 3 people at his discretion, to include at least 1 board member. But 3 people at his discretion, could be all 3 board members, whatever he chooses, and he will take their opinions confidently and make an assessment of the odor.
Works for me.
Seems the easiest way.
So that's more of an
The
internal
cheapest way,
policy, we
right.
can just still keep to what we're doing, we just gotta determine if we still think 5 is the reasonable number.
Yep. And just.
And the Board of Health thing is something we still gotta figure out if we're gonna call them in, or if it's the Board of Selectmen will follow through. And with our powers, we can then ask the Board of Health
And
to
once
support it
again-
with more determined
I would
testing.
think at that point, because you're talking about a licensing bylaw, that would give you the authority to almost have a licensing hearing on that person and basically say, we went up there, we've had 5 documented complaints, we went up there and observed the smell, the odor ourselves, we're putting a 30-day, you have 30 days to correct.
And this, once again, being a bylaw, will give us the authority to make this determination, but maybe that authority should be made initially with Andrew and the Board of Health agent to go out together and determine if they want to bring 3 other people in and include them in it if they want to be.
I kinda like the other way.
But I don't think.
Start with the Board of Selectmen, and then if we all agree, then we bring in the professionals to do the higher level detailed testing. And that would be the Board of Health, not us.
I don't think we need the higher level detail testing at that point. If it's that offensive, then it's that offensive, and we need to try to address it. In fairness to anybody there. I mean, if it knocks your socks off and it's that bad, then it's that bad.
Right, I'm just saying that we're still talking about 3 different individuals providing that opinion, so you might think it's that offensive. He might not, and I might be in the middle ground. Well, at this point, ask the Board of Health to bring in the guy to test the air. Because now we've learned that 3 of us have a completely different sense of smell on this issue.
Unless, you could say in the events that there's not a clear opinion, that we would do testing.
Right, but I'm saying that doesn't even have to be in the bylaw. It just has to say that the
Our
Board of
policy.
Selectmen would follow up on the complaint.
Mhm.
And then just internal policy, we work through all that, because otherwise the bylaw does become more complicated and cumbersome versus just, we reach out and request the Board of Health to assist us in.
So we take out the health agent on down and say that the Board of Selectmen's designee will determine.
The Board of Selectmen, not even
Yeah,
designate. The Board of Selectmen
shall-
will, and we'll do it
Right, so-
however we choose to do it.
Once we have the 5 different complaints, wipe out everything below that and say the Board of Selectmen will evaluate
Initiate an investigation.
this investigation.
I like that better, yeah, just. Things are gonna change, technology will change. If we get too detailed in the bylaw, we're just rewriting it every 2 years.
And that's vague
Keep
enough that
up.
we can form our policy on it and have our policy which can be modified. You know, the Board of Selectmen will make that determination in accordance with their policies. And then our policy now shall be, we'd send Andrew out there, and then if need be, we bring in 3 other people. And that allows us to set a policy which we can change as needed. But it does cover it legally. I feel comfortable with it then. I'm very uncomfortable with how that's written.
Okay.
Otherwise, I agree with you, as they made their changes, recommendations, I had no issues with their recommendations, except for that section. That's the one.
Okay. Anybody else in the, yes, Tom?
How quickly would the town notify business that a complaint has been filed? I hope that I never get a complaint, but if I were to get a complaint, I'd like to know about it that day and not 2 weeks later, so that I can address it as fast as I possibly can.
I agree. Now, I don't know if there's state regulations that actually tell us how we have to respond or if the state has to, but I would that if a complaint is received on a business day, the town will make an attempt to contact that person during business hours of the day the complaint was received, just to notify a complaint was received, no details. Want you to know, complaint was received, we'll be following up and we'll be in touch with you. Like, that generic, that vague, doesn't matter what the complaint was, but that allows us to gather the evidence before we misspeak. But we are letting you know we received a complaint, and you know the day that we can actually do that.
I would define within one business day, because if the complaint comes in at 4, we might not get in touch. I'd say, we shall notify you within one business day.
I would suggest we don't put it in the bylaw, though. I think what we need to do is build a policy and how we will follow the bylaw.
We can certainly do that.
So, otherwise,
But we're in agreement that it
we're
would be
not
as soon
gonna
as
have a
possible.
bylaw ready by June.
We'd want to let you know as soon as possible. I would agree the same thing. I would suggest as soon, if he gets a complaint, he should pick up the phone and call you, hey, someone made a complaint.
And if a policy goes into place and the Board of Selectmen approve it, we are just as accountable to that as a bylaw. So,
I don't anticipate.
we can change it
complaints.
quicker. But we are if it's been approved, might as well be a bylaw.
Giving you a neighbor's support in the proximity of this, the distance away from, I can't imagine that there's gonna be complaints, but I've never been near a multi-acre marijuana field. I have no idea,
Well,
you know, what's gonna happen. And this is part of the experimental stage in the cap at 3. We don't know yet. But we don't wanna discourage it. We just wanna figure out how we have to deal with it as it goes, if we have to deal with it. We may not, hopefully don't have to.
Any further comments? Anything new? All right, I would like to, with the caveat of fixing that paragraph, we'll work through that draft, and at the next true meeting, not next week, but in 2 weeks, hopefully we'll be at a point where we can maybe vote to say, this is the bylaw we want to present at town. So we can say we're done with it, that's what we got.
I would be comfortable, Matt, with striking that part and making that amendment literally here now, so we can release this next Monday as well. I mean, we're getting close enough to, I'd like to give more town, rather than wait another week or 2 more weeks, I'd rather get this out to the town to review. Because if this is we're putting it forward, I'd like people to be able to read it and get comfortable with it, so they can ask us questions before meeting, rather than wait to meeting floor. If people have questions, they could call the administrator on these, and we could do clarifications over the next month.
Well, that's what I'm saying, you can still revise it and send it to us, so we'll review, but on the 20th. Is that the Monday?
Yes.
Yeah. Is that a holiday?
Nah, no.
Okay, it had a weird color to it, so I was like,
Canadian holiday.
okay, thank you.
Hey?
So, on the 20th, we'd actually do our vote to say we agree, but that still gives the public a month to review that before we get to the town meeting. I don't think the public has seen a bylaw 30 days before a town meeting since I've been here. It could change.
All right. That'd be my only.
I'm not disagreeing with you, though, that the earlier we can get it
Soon is-
better,
Soon is better, and I'd love.
but I'd
you
like
know.
to see him have it typed out without comments, and this is
Yeah, I mean,
boom.
and remove all the stricken lines and stuff, so.
And now we're not basing it on motions, that she's gotta make sure she writes the meeting minutes right, so we know that
But
that's
with-
what we voted on, so that
With the
he,
caveat that if he happened to reprint it without the stricken lines and change that by next Monday, I'd be willing to vote on it Monday and get it out there sooner, that's all. But
I gotcha.
at least if it's done for Monday, we could review it and make sure it is fully clean before then. We could review it by email and.
He's not gonna get to that, though, cause he's looking to take 2 to 3 days off between now
Oh,
and Monday.
jeez.
It's like he earned vacation or something, and then gets to use it. Yeah.
Can we make sure we have copies of this for the public hearing?
Most definitely. And that's one of the things we've all been talking about, even with the planning board, is we want your final.
Yeah.
Not one that we're at 99%, but we got one more meeting. I'm hoping we have final from every board that's gonna present a bylaw.
Because
that.
I've heard complaints bylaws being given to them at town meeting and they're having to read through it.
That happened last year to us.
Yeah.
The day before.
I completely agree. So I would like to make sure that we can do that, and
Hence why somebody removed it.
technically, have you guys set your
June
public hearing meeting?
You already said it,
June 6th.
yeah.
Yeah, but it's a finance committee meeting, so I don't think we technically set it for them, so I just
Yeah,
didn't know
but
if you guys had done
gave
that.
it, and so
We're all on
I
the same
went
page.
along
And that's
with it.
okay, you know, I just didn't want to assume because we said something that you guys are like,
Earlier, but that's okay.
okay.
Give them a chance to read things.
And that,
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's 2 weeks
As long
prior
as
to
we're
the
all
town
ready.
meeting. And exactly, and if anybody has questions, continue to spread the word now
I want it back
about
on.
the schedule. Maybe we should post the schedule
Yes.
on the
I could have that on
website
this-
saying,
It's getting hot, I just realized I'm like sweating.
Oh.
We shut it
On the
off on
6th.
Andrew, it's just getting hot again fast.
and then,
It was cool earlier, but now I'm sitting there sweating.
and maybe if there's any way we can actually get a way to try to get a head count of people that might want to be there. I don't know if there's a way to do that online or not, or if it's too close to make it a useful effort. Just so we don't print out 700 copies and find out 2 people show up versus,
Well,
We anticipated, or you mean for the public hearing?
yeah.
if you do an event, you know, where they're interested in that, it's a good way of
Oh, yeah, Facebook event
Because we
that's
did that
interested
for-
going.
the church thing up at the
Check here if you'd like a
courthouse,
copy of the
and had an
bylaw,
estimate
you mean.
of how
I like the
many-
concept of the event though, because it does.
And it would
But
be
then
out
Andrew's
to a
gonna
lot
have
of
to be
people.
crazy watching the comments. Because
Not
Facebook,
necessarily.
well, you
You
don't
won't
know
get
You can
this.
just say
Or
the comments
archive.
up. You can have
You don't have
commentary.
to
dis-
And I'm
you can have
comfortable with
commentary
it. Now, don't
disabled
get me
anyway.
wrong, my comment was about the lowest common denominator, not the average person that's watching and looking, so. Unless they feel they're the highest common denominator, and that's okay too. Anyway. I have no more. We started with the public hearing and the delay, so I didn't get to it in the beginning. Do you have something, Sam?
And I'd like to wait until we discuss the annual town meeting warrant.
Okay then.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Solar update?
Not much more than what I had presented from the last meeting. I am waiting for some additional quotes back from Woodward and Kern to see what the pricing would be to do a analysis on a cap for the Town Farm Road site. So that way I can have full pricing RFP before going out for pricing, but, nothing's changed as far as market conditions and where we're at and, the utility studies, so. Still plugging away, just,
Got a question.
yes.
And I'm very unfamiliar with the site, so forgive me if someone's gonna blow up on me when I say this. But if I'm correct, the town did 2 years ago accept a parcel of land, what is it, behind Trafalgar Square or something like that. It was about 100 that, and then the next year they said they wanted it for conservation purposes. Solar energy is a energy conservation measure. It's considered green. I don't know how much of that site actually is already open, because I know it's not all trees,
So-
nor is it all, so that's what I meant. Has anybody talked about as putting that into the RFP as another place for them to look and tell us what's viable?
The only thing is they put it into the care and custody of the Conservation Commission.
So we just gotta ask them if it's something they'd consider. It's conservation. They can say, no, we don't agree with it. That's all I meant, we just asked.
And I think it was under the assumption that it'd be conserved for passive recreation. But, I mean, I can double check on that. I think there was.
I thought the
specific-
bylaw may not have said anything about
Right.
passive.
I just
That's
don't know whether or
somebody
not
else's
that
personal
violates,
opinion.
even if it doesn't, I don't know if that violates the spirit of the donation, just because it's, not
Again, I'm
really
not
a
saying put 2
conservation open
megawatts on
space,
it,
yeah.
but it's right next to our water pump station. You put in some solar there, you tie it actually to the water pump building, and now you're not paying for your electric for your water pumps.
If it's is it on,
I think it wraps around the water pump property. Or the water pump property was in the corner.
I can look
Just
into the-
thoughts.
Yeah.
I don't wanna push it any further. And like I said, I'm not really
The-
trying to push it, because I know a lot of people look at it as a visual. Some other people look at it as truly a conservation measure to try to reduce the impact on your environment. And depending on the size of it, it could just be an example of, here's your forest and here's what we're doing to try to maintain your forest. You know, it's more of an educational opportunity in that. So you're not putting a huge system, you're just doing it almost like maybe a charging station for a car could be there too.
One of the big advantages of the town farm road site is that with that, the landfill piece is that, you know, the incentives from the state are really for capped landfills. That they're more incentivizing the siting on there because they know that there's no real other use of a landfill than to put a solar on. You can't develop anything on top of it, so they almost hold them at a higher priority and provide additional tax credits versus just clear cutting open space or you know, just having a town-owned parcel and going, we want to put it there. So, you know, even if we were to take the you know, that parcel of land on Town Farm Road and split it off, that the landfill's over here and we're going to put the solar over here, the incentives wouldn't be the same. So I think that the landfill piece of it is kind of critical to the viability of it. Because we did look at another parcel that was a tax title parcel, but it was just, you know, I didn't get the same kind of sense that it was as desired as a capital landfill. But one of the other options would be.
Now, the question is,
Yeah.
there's never a site assignment there, right?
I don't believe so.
It's just historically believed to have been a landfill that got covered because people watched and listened and saw it all the time.
It's on.
Not because it
I can
was.
tell you all about it.
That's what
on
I
the
need
name.
better understanding, so I understand why someone could even look at it and say
DEP
it
does.
meets the landfill, because it's not on DEP's list of landfill.
It is.
It is?
It is.
I didn't see
It
that.
is. And it's a incomplete, uncapped landfill. It's on their list.
So, okay, that was my first
Yeah.
time I actually understood that they have it on their list.
Yes.
Okay.
Incomplete so we could start putting trash in again.
People still do.
Kidding. Oh,
I'll
don't
tell
say
you
that.
that.
Don't even say that.
But it's in one of those, it's just in one of those gray areas right now of that there's a lot of those on the state's list and they're not in the, I say the business right now of going after the ones that are just sitting there. It's just whether or not you start kind of poking the bear and saying, we want to do something with this. We want the DEP's attention on this. We need because you need a post-closure certificate from the DEP in order to develop the solar on top of it. So if they come out now and you're involving them in the process, they might say whether or not you put a solar panel on this or not, we're still going to require you to put a cap on it.
Yeah.
That's where you might run into a little bit of an issue, especially where I think that it would greatly benefit us to get a cost from an engineer to say this is what the price would be to do it, so that way before we start going out there and knowing what the potential impact is, if we never did end up doing solar, it turned out to be unfeasible because of, you know, either market conditions or utility caps or what have you, at least we know if we start getting the DEP involved, what the cost of capping that would be. So I guess that's the real reason why I'd like to try to get those numbers in place before kind of throwing the feelers out there to potential developers to say, what can you do for us?
Additionally, other things we can do, reaching out to Quabbin Regional High School. My understanding, and I might not be completely accurate, is one of the, when you talk about, what do they call it, the net minimum funding requirement from the state for schools, that
Minimum, yeah,
I
minimum
forget
net
the-
school spending.
Thank you,
Yeah.
net school spending. If you have solar, that offsets that. You don't have to count the saved energy from solar as part of your budget line item? So that we could work with them and then they could consider that part of their budget and then pay it back to us based on the actual production. So if we use their site or worked with them in their site and shared the cost of developing something on their site, they can actually pay us out of their budget without it seeming like they had to increase their budget because they didn't meet the net minimum. In other words, it's not like we're just gonna pay less as part of the assessment. It's, they do it and then they pay us back as part of their benefit for having a reduced utility cost. They're paying us because we helped pay for the actual install.
I don't think we.
So they're
I think that-
buying it from us in a way.
But I think that goes back as to whether or not we want to be the ones to fund the development, or if we just want to be in the business of leasing property.
Right, or we just tell them and they can go figure that out without us. That leasing the property thing or, but I'm speaking also of Ruggles Lane. We own that building. They're just running the, so that, I know you said how close are we getting to them into our green communities package?
We're looking to do it into the next fiscal year. We just need to send them the Department of Energy Resources, the baseline assessment stuff. That's working with CMRPC. They have their consultants working on that. So.
It's, okay.
Basically, the goal was the next grant round, which is
How many years of trends do you need? 3?
It's 5. I believe it's 5 years of trend.
Because that's one that we can definitely do an entire facility LED upgrade. Schools are traditionally a huge lighting load, and you can almost save anywhere from 25 to 40% of your electric bill just by doing that upgrade. I'm just thinking about the solar places because the town owns lots of property. I don't want to look at something that's just a 2 megawatt sized lot.
So I think
Where else can we put it that's useful?
I think one of the most beneficial spots would be on the roof of the public safety building to offset the direct costs on that building.
That's an expensive electric bill, over $2,000 a month.
Yeah, you're looking
Can
at
you
about
roll that
20
into the RFP?
As a
Depends on
potential
how
site.
yeah, it's more like
I mean, we might just do that as a standalone RFP, just to say what would the cost be on that, because then you're not
right, but
making it contingent.
then each person can't combine all of the options to say, we could give you this if we use these 3 buildings to do this. Instead, it's, you get this, you get that, you get that. But because each one's separate, I can't sit here and actually negotiate with you the.
Well, the other thought is that, we don't end up, whoever we end up leasing that property to, we could come out with a clear indication that we're not interested in purchasing any of the solar credits from the property. It's up to the developer to go and sell them to somebody else. And we basically go and put, we do the same thing like we did on the DPW building, put the solar panels on that building ourselves to offset the cost. And then that site selling basically just the property to a developer and saying it's up to you to go find the people who are willing to purchase the solar credits, rather than using it to offset our own use.
Well, I was thinking being even more generic. It's just, here's a site, tell me the best you can offer. Here's a site, tell me the best you can offer, and they can choose lease, they can choose PPA, they can choose this, and then they're like, this is what I can offer you.
I could just see the first question they'll probably ask is, are we supplying electricity to any town building? And then you basically have to take out any buildings that are already, or any accounts that are already being funded through the Iron Horse agreement. So you can't offset that.
Only if it's completely funded, right? You can use percentages.
Right.
But could we also just sell electricity to the school? Even if it's a different site?
Under the new AOBC SMART program, you can. And it's not actually the SMART program. The AOBC is the supplementary program they created that works with the SMART program.
I would
And what it
imagine-
is it's got to be a standalone system. And once it is, the owner of that site can transfer credits to any other customer from National Grid within National Grid's territory. They don't even have to be your own accounts anymore.
Okay. But the good thing, of course, the schools, I'm sure they have a hefty electric bill, probably supersedes the public safety building, I would imagine, by 2 or 3 times.
The only question is whether or not they've already taken that step to purchase solar credits. I can't guarantee with any that they haven't.
It's worth
made
looking
that.
into, that's all, because
Right.
that would be a good way to use the funds if we could do that and put up on a site. I'd imagine the amount of solar they could put in the police station would be far more than we could use at the police station. So if we did say put them on the roof of the police
Police
station.
station's our biggest electrical user outside of the school.
Right, but still,
I'm just saying, there's
They
not
could-
enough square footage on that roof to keep up. Because it's 100% electric heat and cooling.
Right.
I'd be surprised if they couldn't provide more than we need for that building. I looked at my barn before, which is considerably smaller in size, and I was gonna offset, and my bill was running about 800, 900 a month, so almost half what they're doing there. And I could have done it off my barn. Oh, I had 14.
Ask him what the last
The public
heating
safety-
electric bill at the public safety building was.
2,000 was the last.
Yeah, I mean, we're
A
at.
month, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's about 20.
Double what mine was,
20.
and my surface size of the roof is probably a quarter.
It's about 25,000 a year.
No, your roof is south facing though.
The barn roof is, yeah, it was south, yeah.
So, I mean, it doesn't matter.
Depends, yeah,
We'll work it out, we'll figure it
depends
out.
on-
I'm sorry, I
Right,
got
but-
down a rabbit hole here. My bad.
But I bet we could get.
Yes, Sam.
Chief of Police mentioned to me during some of our discussions, and Andrew did as well, is that it costs $30,000 a year for electricity for the public safety building.
Right. That's why I think that the rooftop system on there, directly offsetting that, would probably be the most direct impact to reducing our
Right.
energy usage.
And over a 25-year life, we're looking at,
It also depends, if you do a
7.5
25 kilowatt or smaller, you get caught up a little bit in the smaller scale and the cost to install, but you have no interconnection agreement. It's just, you put it on, National Grid's not gonna be able to say you can't.
Right. We don't have to
Okay.
worry about dealing with the utilities we go.
It's pretty much yep, you're good, you're not gonna hurt our system, you're not big enough.
Right. We don't have to worry about
And-
being 5 years down the line waiting until the utility,
So to
transition
say-
And
Station
actually,
site
I
finishes,
think
so.
that level, am I right? Automatically fits into the National Grid net metering because that's the only cap that still has room left is that, or it's just an automatic, like they're not even measuring it.
Like cell 8.
Because it's 25 kilowatts, we're gonna give you $2 a month the rest of our lives and it's still not gonna make a
They were like
difference.
cell 8 of however they were portioning it off, and they were 75% through that cell. So that's why we were was looking at, by the time we did our due diligence, selected a contractor, had them go into the queue, they were already looking at the next grant round. There's gotta be somebody who's gonna jump up
Yeah.
and fill those last 25% of the last cell of the SREC program.
so maybe it's worth letting that one stand on its own then as an RFP and try to get it done.
Yeah, you can. My thought was just having a little broader stroke meant that somebody
Yeah.
can come to us with options that are beyond what we can actually imagine sitting at the table.
But also, if we do that, we also cumbersome this project up to where it's gonna be harder for us to act and move. If something comes good in one piece like this, we could move. If we have 3 pieces together looking at it, it may be harder to get a project going and even longer.
We won't be able to act on anything probably at least until special town meeting because we won't have any funds for it. So this is all preliminary,
Right.
figure out what it would cost and
And
then we go to the town, so we're kind of in a weird spot.
It would probably take that long to get an agreement going with the company in this, but as standalone, I don't think we get close on, as a part of 3 or 4 piece project. I don't think we get close by next fall. I don't think.
I agree.
At least getting something agreed upon. So if this stands alone, we'd have a good chance of having that ready for the special town meeting and moving forward with it, which would be a step in the right direction.
Okay.
Start working on
I hear you. Okay, so let me just make sure here. Let's go to the annual town meeting warrant.
Do you want to hit the license quick on the contracts? And these would be quick.
Is
License
somebody here
contract.
for those?
I don't know.
Those are administrative. I figured I'd just talk to the things that I think people really care about,
Okay.
not I
Fair
want a
enough.
liquor license or I want to hire somebody.
Yep. I guess
Maybe I'm
I'll
wrong,
back
but-
it in. Cool.
We do have other things here we could talk about. if
I
you're
want to see this thing real
interested.
quick is all. I like getting stuff checked off the list, but
Yeah.
it doesn't really matter. You're right. They're not here.
So, annual town meeting warrant. June 18th, 2019, Commonwealth of Massachusetts, Worcester. This is a draft that we got, pretty much Articles 1 through...
36.
36.
No, 1 through
Oh, the basics.
16 are our standard administrative type basics, whether it's budget, right to choose town officers, Chapter 90 grant. Nothing that I believe we're gonna be debating as to whether we'd put it on it or revise it or change it
Correct.
at this time. Getting into Article 17, we get into the capital plan of the one police cruiser a year, every 5 years, due to our demand, use, and wear and tear. So once again, this is also on the warrant, has been requested. Article 18, police service revolver replacement. Any questions on that?
We've already discussed that.
Right. DPW sweeper. They've been asking for this for a few years now. At least in the capital planning side. I don't want to say it's ever made it to town floor because I think it's been cut a few times.
I thought it did, and then they just never wound up purchasing. For
It
some reason, I
got
thought it was
close,
there.
or the skid
Couple years
steer, I
ago.
think, made it to the warrant. And the sweeper was a Chapter 90 fund request that went back and forth.
That's maybe what it was in Chapter 90 side, but I
So
know
it was more of a Board of Selectmen sign off of the Chapter 90
and it
funds,
didn't-
right?
Didn't wind up going.
Well,
But
something
you're right.
like
It's
this-
been here for a couple of years.
Right.
Absolutely.
So, and they need it, if you've noticed. The roads are a little bit rocky and sandy and gravelly. We need the street sweeper. Article 20, DPW mower. New mower for the DPW. Do we know more descriptions on the type of mower they're talking about? Is this
Just
a
a jet, like,
a John
for-
Deere Parks
yeah, it was
mower?
like an 8,000, they were looking for about $8,000 for a Parks Department type mower.
When's the last time we did a mower?
I think they said it was like 2 years ago, but this wasn't, they have.
Right, we have several, right?
Yeah.
So we
Yeah.
hadn't, so if we placed 1 2 years ago, I don't think that's too bad. They gotta have, I would think, 3 or 4. I would hope.
Yeah.
Right, and
They've gotta be in a replacement period
was there
too.
wording, maybe this is more supporting the cemetery commission? The last mower
Parks
was
and-
like the
it's
parks, this is
and
kind of,
cemetery,
yeah,
Because they kind of merged that all into
Right.
one.
I remember that now, okay. Article 21, fire department equipment, needs to be much more specific than fire department equipment. What
Yeah,
is he
so
asking for?
This is basically equipment that was, that was to go onto the new engine that was coming. So their plan was to take as much from the current engine 4 to move to the new engine 4, but stuff like the I think he was talking about a few ladders that were from the predecessor to that engine that they weren't going to be able to salvage. New.
Did he
connectors.
provide a breakdown and a
I
total
will ask
estimate
him
on
for-
this?
For a breakdown, he said this was preliminary, it was kind of, I had a conversation when the warrant was closing, he was still looking for pricing, but asked, I'm still getting pricing in, so if you
Okay.
could just put it on there for now. I will have a more detailed or outlay, but he said it was about $7,000 worth of equipment that they were looking to do for outfitting. Primarily, I think it was like radios, an intake valve, and ladders were the three primary things that I can remember off the top of my head that were more of like when the new truck came in, it was going to be better off for them to purchase new rather than recycling.
Okay.
But I will provide, I still have to bring that to the finance committee too, because it was a late request.
Right, and also maybe the finance committee could let us know if it's something they'd rather put into the omnibus budget
Okay.
and increase the equipment line item versus here, because it,
Can you speak as to your experience with intake valves and things? I don't want to. I don't know if you provide any insight to those things.
Well, they're critical.
just explain what it is.
Oh, it's basically, for establishing water supply, the intake valve.
It's your
is-
suction valve
Yeah,
from
it's
the
basically
pond to fill the tanker?
Well, the intake on the engine as to where your hard suction connects into the engine, that's pretty much
Rigid pipe.
what's that?
Rigid pipe.
Yeah, your rigid pipe. So that's where you're going in from a static water source into your pump. So your primary attack line comes from the tank, or if your initial line comes from the tank, then you have to establish once you go through your first 1,000 gallons of water, you then have to establish a water supply. That's your main source into the engine from your water supply.
Okay, the intake valve is where you connect your hose that's going to your alternate source of water.
If it's, right, one's pond versus truck or hydrant.
Right.
That's where the valve comes in.
Yeah.
So you could explain that to them.
Yes.
So the valves are, you may have two intake valves, one for different reasons?
Right.
The pond obviously has much more straining and filtering capability.
It's a straight pipe.
Yeah.
It's a draft, it's like a straw.
Okay.
But if somebody's sending water to you from a truck or from a hydrant,
Oh, they
that-
can maintain pressure in the line so it doesn't have to be
that
as
valve
hard pipe.
that valve is gated, so you can control what volume of water is, the pressure that's coming into your engine.
Okay.
Because if you overpressure the intake, you'll overpressure your hose lines in the output. And those typically, for some reason, we don't use that often, they gum up and they stick and they bind. And reusing an old one is.
Oh, okay, I
not
get you.
always- It's like a valve faucet in your house, sooner or later the seals dry out, things stick. You find a ball valve you haven't operated in years, you gotta turn it, the handle comes off in your hand.
Yeah.
It's no different,
Gotcha.
and it's a pretty crucial.
Yeah, and I'm not denying it's needed, I'm just saying, does it
No,
need
I-
a separate article, or should it just be in the omnibus
But-
budget and they recognize?
I understand.
Let the finance committee come back to us and say, keep the article,
Sometimes
or
I
we
understand
decided
why
to
he
roll
doesn't
it
want to
in.
lateral the old valve, and we've had a lot of issues with some of the valves in that truck over the years, because they've already been recycled. That's
What's going on with the Felton Field improvements? Because apparently the money we gave them last year, they didn't spend yet.
So that was the total amount that they had requested. It was about, the amount that was appropriate was about half of the amount that they needed overall. So that was originally the removal of it was primarily the removal of the trees. Now they're looking at the removal of the stumps and regrading of the driveway, and that's why they're looking for additional funds to supplement that. So basically an additional, it's not that they haven't spent it, they're still, they're waiting for the bill to expend.
Is there any way DPW can work with regrading the driveway?
that would be a good question for next week.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, the questions come up on that.
Didn't Felton Field Commission came to our finance committee meeting. We discussed quite a bit with them. In fact, I think I might go to one there, they've got a meeting coming up.
Yeah, tomorrow night.
But they said that all the stumps had been removed.
I
at
looked
that
down the
meeting.
street, they did. The stumps
They
are
said,
out.
have you noticed all the stumps have been removed?
So that happened in the last
They
week.
cut all the trees already? Last time I was down there, because I didn't get to the car show.
The
And
trees
they
were gone at the
said-
car show, but the stumps are still there at the car show.
They
So
said
they're
R.J.
gone this week.
McDonald had done it, and I'm wondering,
Oh, it was
Did they
it was
do
the
it-
fence repair, or the fence installation was the phase 2 that they were looking for the funding for.
Where's that gonna be, along the road?
along the road where the
Have they
trees
spent the
were.
15,000 that they said they had to
15.
support this?
The 15,000 is going toward the tree and stump removal.
But I.
And last year's 9,000 we gave them was for the fence, or vice versa?
That might have been donated.
It was something like that. They had 15, we had 9, or something like that. We had a total of like 24,000 that was gonna accomplish this.
I don't remember 9.
That was 10 or something,
But I asked.
Well, yeah, I don't
them
recall a
Yeah, that-
specific number, but we weren't giving them, it wasn't a dollar for dollar for match, and I thought they said they had like 15,000.
My concern and issue was that the Riding and Driving Club, which is the primary users with the Felton Hill Commission runs the whole field. The Little League takes care of itself. They fundraise, they maintain the fields, they mow the fields, they take care of their portion. You know, so the rec fields are done without using funds from the finance committee. And the Riding and Driving Club, they're the primary user for the arenas and the rings and the snack shed, because they have probably a dozen events a year where they have horses come out. And you'll see sometimes 40 trailers there. They stay overnight. They do 5-10 mile trail rides through the woods. They have competitions in the arenas, you know, different types of riding events, the arenas for all ages. And they charge fees for this. And I was on the Riding and Driving Club years ago. They make quite a bit of money, and they give thousands in scholarships, and they command a lot of money for the things they want to do. And my feeling is if they want money towards the arenas or towards the things specifically their Riding and Driving Club uses, they can fund those themselves. But the property itself, especially with, as I said before, 4-H is coming in and they're going to invest. I want to invest for things like that. So if we want to put a fence back up, you need that. If they're going to have, at some point, you know, even the car show, you have fees for access to people for admission, you need a way to control that. So there's nothing wrong with something back, as long as that's what it's for. And I haven't talked to them to know what it's for. And that's what I
Yeah,
asked
sorry,
Andrew.
I wasn't prepared with.
Don't
my,
know what the
budget
funds
in
are
front of me
for to
I
got you.
And maybe you
I
can
asked for the
clarify.
background, because it's always been kind of vague.
And I do have those numbers. I do have a full report. I just.
And you've got the deeds of the land being
Yes.
given copies, because the town owns Felton Field.
Right.
Now, I was always under the impression that the Felton Field Commission owned the field.
I was too to start.
I wasn't.
The
owns
town
that
owns
field.
it. It's under the care and custody of the Felton Field Commission. So-
That's how I've understood it, but that's
And-
just an
Well, I
assumption.
understand that now, but it's odd that they have that, but we still have a Parks Division dealing with all of our other parks.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought it was private at the time, because
Yeah,
I didn't have the same history in town as some others.
but they charge for, I asked if they charge for using the field,
Yes.
$200 for an event. Now that car show,
It's a lot cheaper
He paid
per square foot
200.
than town hall.
yeah. I said I think they need to relook at their fees for that car show. I heard he was getting $10 a head to go in there, and the vendors that are in there pay him a certain fee also.
Right, I know the association, the fire association, we're fortunate because we'd initially done that with them, I think. Some of them so we don't pay a fee luckily, but we pay to rent the shed from the Riding
Yeah.
Driving Club. But I understood the vendors were paying, other vendors were paying more than our rental fee to be there, but I don't know what the number was.
Well, the vendors' fees were going to the event.
Right, to Greg, yeah.
Well, all of
And
it
he
goes to
was
Greg,
only
and then he's
paying
got to
$100
redistribute to cover his
for the use of
costs.
the field. Now,
Well,
he
not
should be
everything
paying
is,
more.
You gotta let him make money off it.
I'm sure he's
Yeah, but he made.
paying for the entertainment. He's
Tons.
paying for, not everybody that shows up is paying him to be there. He's got to pay other people to help bring people there.
But I think $200 is a very low fee.
I don't disagree with that, especially if you're considering the entire site is $200.
Yeah.
There are times you can rent out the white building or the Little League field,
Well,
you know, or all in the same day. They can be different groups broken out, and that's a Felton Field Commission thing that we just gotta,
And
once again, it's their
Maybe they
commission,
do
it's
that,
their
and I don't
control.
know.
And if that's what they choose, we can advise them that they might do better in their funding if they get more for it, but
if
it's,
they want us to fund them,
then you can make
This is
requests.
the same
Right.
thing like the library.
Yes.
And that's why I started asking a lot of questions. And that field was donated to the town as parks and recreation. Wasn't just for horse things. And I know the baseball fields, they've
It's
had
actually one of the
complaints
best
about
parks
the
we have in
extra-
town, to include the basketball
The
courts.
extra field that their practice field.
Mm-hmm.
They're horse trailers, and the horses tear it all up.
I'm surprised they go that far back. They didn't.
Is it
used
by
to.
law
They do.
that sets up the Felton Field
They
Commission?
do, and that's what the baseball
it a
people were
charge?
complaining about,
It's
but
the
Felton
fee.
saying, well, we need it for the
Establishes
horses.
the Felton Field Commission.
But if it's a parks and recreation for the town of Barry, it's gotta be used for all.
Maybe we should review the documents with the gift and make sure we're not violating the spirit of the gift. And that
Now,
commission needs
Andrew
to,
saw them, I asked them for them.
the
Did they
commission would
have
need to,
papers?
make proper efforts to be held to that.
Right, I mean, part of that is that it's a $20,000, saying, fund that was established that they basically are
Endowment
living
to
on, or it's an
maintain it.
endowment that they're living off the interest from to maintain that, so.
But they do receive donations, quite a few donations that they.
The endowment's at
It-
27,000 right now.
Because the 4-H had done, they estimated about $10,000 worth of work there.
Right.
Because that was, I asked if 4-H is having their fair there, are they being charged for their event? Well, they didn't charge them this year because they had put in this money.
Right, my understanding is that's gonna be more of a partnership, that, because they intend to contribute and possibly you could erect buildings there as well. So, charging a fee, it's more, you know what I mean, more of a partnership where they're gonna help improve the site, and they're gonna bring, hopefully, events that our town folk can enjoy, especially the youth, which I was excited about that, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't wanna see a fee go to 4-H.
But
You
if they're
know.
bringing.
Are their meetings usually later at night?
Like the 4-H into town and these kind of things, they need to use it, let townspeople use it too.
Right.
Okay,
You know.
I would like to take this, appreciate your input, get back to the warrant, and maybe we can put Felton Field on the agenda the next meeting, so
Right,
we
see
can get
what's-
more into these and follow up.
What the money's for.
So what is the thing on the warrant for Felton Field?
Article 22, field improvements, it says.
The description is a generic Felton Field improvements.
Well, we told them we probably could not give them any money this year,
Okay.
but we would look into it. And they suggested that attend a meeting, which I noticed there was one coming up,
When do you need
and I thought I would.
this, what's the
We
date for
can-
publish of this?
Well, I have it on the schedule for the 20th, but we have all of it in you don't need to sign it for 7 days prior to the meeting, so.
No, the
If-
constables have to post it, what, 7 days
7
prior to
days
the meeting?
prior. So
Okay.
if there's any reason why you don't
So we
sign it at the
technically
next
have to
meeting-
June 3rd to meet as a board to actually finalize it if we wanted to.
What date is our public hearing on it?
The
Public
6th.
hearing's
The
the
6th.
6th.
Well, hopefully by the 20th
We
we're all
have it done
set.
before then, but-
So we'll go through this now, but on the 20th, hopefully we'll have more understanding of numbers and we can determine whether we want to scratch something and move
A little
on.
clarity in some of those.
Say the biggest unknown with everything right now is where the school budget's gonna land. That's all
Yeah.
gonna be predicated on what happens with the Senate's budget.
Yep.
Say we're
Article
hopeful,
20.
When I saw an article that said the state's $1 billion above their estimated receipts. So.
That's marijuana.
Yeah.
You think they'll get it?
They're taxing the heck out of it. Yes, but the bad news is they're all getting pay raises in Congress. And we're not gonna see
I
any.
don't have enough money because. Article 23, Ruggles Lane PA system and telephone replacement. This has been on the school's capital request plan for at least 2, maybe 3 years. I know in discussions with Andrew, This is something I would support depending on how the actual school budget fall goes through, in relation to also how the other towns are approaching the assessments that have been recommended by the school committee. Again, we have some other towns that are asking us to say, you know what, you're still asking too much, and I kind of agree with that. But if we can get down to that level, and I don't recall the exact numbers we're talking here, it sounded like we could put this back in for us, because I think it's worth it to do that. I think the money overall isn't the bigger issue for us, but I think our neighboring towns can use the support. And I think helping our neighbors, and then we can reinvest in the elementary school as a benefit to us. That's my general thought.
Yeah, 'cause the other big thing was the repaving of the parking lot too. So,
And this fixing the sidewalk up front, as I recall. From
yeah, that was all
years ago.
part of that.
As we mentioned earlier, minimum net school funding, we are several $1 million over our minimum net school funding requirement. My opinion has been pretty clear and strong since I've been on this board, that I would like to see their budget not only reduce in their increases, but go to a zero net increase, and possibly bring it back a little bit. We are well above net school funding minimums. We have continually, if you look back historically over the last 10 years, given them, except for the last year really, virtually everything they've asked for. And we've watched our standing in the state education-wise decline over that decade continuously. So we keep reinvesting and giving them everything they asked for, and the performance doesn't seem to show for what our students are getting. And pouring more money at it because they asked for it isn't going to fix our education. And until I see our standings in the state rise for the education, where we stand percentage-wise, percentile in the state, I don't want to continue to fund them at increases in their budget. I'd like them to learn to spend their money wisely and make the education work. Giving them more money is not improving our education. And frankly, that's the only thing in this issue I really care about, is our education increasing. When I moved to this town, we were something around the top 30 percentile or so of the state, and we're now in the bottom 30. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating as their numbers go up, their percentage of the budget go up. And I've advocated to Andrew, and I said it to this board, and I said it last year when the school exceeded the budget, I said that's a great start. I'd like to see it go down next year, maybe a zero increase, and I'm serious about that. And Hubbardson's recommendation, I think, was a 1.4%, and I'd be happy with that if we could get it that low this year. That's a lesser increase of the budget than before, and far less than they've asked, and I think that would make a tremendous difference in our budget this year as well. That net change would be a couple $100,000 in the town if we kept the budget down to that low of an increase. And I would be surprised if the other towns wouldn't want to support it. And this goes back to our select boards trying to have a committee, include finance committee, and discuss these issues. I think the school committee's job is supposed to be represent our towns with the school's budget, and I feel like our school committee has not listened to our town's interest, although last time they came back with a lower recommendation, they still don't seem to understand how significant an impact they have on every aspect of our budget with their numbers. And how something as small as another 2% change in their budget will make funding a lot of these other articles very simple. It's that big a difference. So I was hoping to ask for a zero increase, and I don't think we'll get there in 1 year, but I would support Hubbardson's 1.4%. I assume you guys all got the same email I did from them. But I would like us to discuss that, and maybe agree with that number, and let Andrew forward that to the other town administrators, so the towns can present a unified opinion on this. The selectmen anyways. And the sooner we do it, the more they have time to look at it before a town meeting, which is fair to them. I don't want to surprise them on meeting floor with this.
Did you have a chance, Dylan, to read the email from Hubbardson regarding the school budget?
I haven't gotten to get to that one yet.
Okay. I'm generally in agreement with Greg on this, but yeah, again, I don't have it right in front of me to
I did bring my
spout
tablet.
specifics.
They were pretty specific.
It was basically that they.
Yeah, I mean, they had
didn't want-
specific numbers and you followed up with,
It was they basically voted that the school, in their budget, that the school should get a 5% increase on
Their
their
budget.
assessment.
yeah.
So what I followed up with was what a 5% increase in Hubbardston assessment would translate out to the other towns using the formula.
Yeah.
Which then was, I think, what, like one.
346.
What's that?
1.4% increase and a
1.4.
$346,000 reduction in their request from us. I
From
believe,
the initial.
from their initial request,
Right.
unless I'm recalling my numbers incorrectly, which,
I think it was more. I remember their overall. I think that was actually a reduction of almost $600,000 from their.
you got the budget and our
Their-
portion was.
Our portion
Our
was.
40% portion of
Yeah.
that was 600 something. But it was gonna reduce our portion about 340,000 and change. By allowing them a 1.4% increase, which a lot of our town departments are getting similar to that, in that ballpark. And I think that's reasonable. I would like to, as I said last year, I'd like to see them have a similar increase as our other town budgets, not they get 8% and everyone else has to drop an even lower percent. If our total revenues go up by a certain percentage, I'd like to see the towns all grow by that percentage, the budgets, not one jump ahead and everyone else get a small proportion. Because over the years, the last 10 years, many departments have cut quite strongly and continue to cut as the school continued to grow. So as other towns receded by 10, 15% in some years, they cut their budget 10 to 15%. The schools grew by 8%, 10%. And, if the school was asked to recede their budget by 15% a year, they would, be very opposed to it. But other departments in this town had done this for a decade. And it was frustrating to watch it, and I think a 1.4 increase is a very reasonable request. And I feel strongly on it.
So maybe this week we'll find out if we throw that on to the next week's impromptu agenda.
I'd like to get an answer, like I said, the committee.
That'll give Dylan a chance to try to think about it a little bit more and then get back so we can actually have more of a. I just mean, I don't feel comfortable saying, let's vote to send something to
No.
the other towns because.
Let him read it in two,
But-
but that, at least in 2 weeks from now, that'll give us a chance to get it out there so the school committee has some warning it's coming. Because they're gonna need to sit down and have a serious look, like, how would you like it, Claire, if we said, oh, we're just gonna take a couple $100,000 out of the town's budget, rework all your numbers. They've got a whole budget to go through as well, and they've gotta figure out where those cuts are gonna happen. It's of their whole overall budget, I mean, they're, I don't know, $36 million budget request this year. So $600,000 in total is a 40th, it's, 2% of their budget, something like that total. It's not huge, but it's got a very large impact on our budget.
Okay.
But I want them to have time.
Yes, Sam.
It would also be nice, considering the increases in taxes year after year after year for the town of Barry, it would be really nice to be able to lower the taxes, and maybe there'd be some,
We did last year.
there'd be some.
Your tax rate went down last year.
The rate went, wait a moment,
Yeah.
wait a minute.
The valuation went up.
The rate-
Well,
the
then
rate-
be more clear about what you mean by your taxes going down.
We're talking about taxes.
It'll never go down.
Don't say that, because there was a house sold in Barry.
When was the
recently.
last time you can tell me that one fiscal year total amount paid out of your pocket to pay the tax bill? So in other words, don't play tax rate, don't play assessment.
But that's what
The money you
that's
paid
what-
the town in
that's
one
what
year.
you have done.
No, that's what's been going on forever.
You just
Excuse
did that.
Sam, when was the last time
I don't
you
know.
went from one year and the next year you paid the town less?
I don't know when it was, but it's